Rain pounded against the glass storefront as Ellie, a 45-year-old grocery cashier working the night shift, watched a teenage boy huddled under the store's awning, soaked and shivering. She'd seen him before scavenging through dumpsters behind the store, his thin frame and haunted eyes reminding her of someone she once knew. When her break came, Ellie grabbed her homemade sandwich and stepped into the downpour, offering half to the startled teen whose grateful acceptance sparked something deep within her, a forgotten instinct, a buried memory. Neither could have imagined that this simple act of kindness would unravel a 20-year-old mystery, connecting two souls torn apart by circumstances beyond their control, revealing a truth that would change both their lives forever. Could this homeless teen be the missing piece of Ellie's broken past? Comment below with your thoughts and share any unexpected connections that changed your life. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming stories that remind us how deeply we're all connected. The apartment door closed behind Ellie with a familiar click that echoed through the empty space. She leaned against it, eyes closed, the image of the boy's face still vivid in her mind. Something about him, something in those eyes had stirred memories she'd spent 17 years trying to contain. Her one-bedroom apartment was modest, but meticulously kept. Framed photographs lined the hallway. Ellie in her 20s, smiling with friends whose names she barely remembered now. Her parents at their 40th anniversary. Her sister's family in matching Christmas sweaters. But there were no recent photos of Ellie. It was as if her life had stopped developing at 20-8. She hung her rain-soaked jacket on the hook and moved through the darkened living room, past the kitchen where she'd left a single light on. Her footsteps led automatically to the door at the end of the hall, the door she sometimes went days without opening. Tonight, though, she couldn't resist. The room beyond was smaller than a proper bedroom originally intended as an office or storage space, but Ellie had transformed it into something else entirely. Moonlight filtered through sheer curtains, illuminating walls painted a soft blue. A crib stood against one wall, never assembled, its parts still in their original packaging. After 17 years, a mobile of stars and planets hung from a hook in the ceiling. On shelves along the wall sat stuffed animals, baby books, tiny clothes with tags still attached. In the corner, a rocking chair held a teddy bear wearing a blue t-shirt that read, "Mommy's Little Man." Ellie moved to the dresser, opening the top drawer with trembling hands. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, lay a small hospital bracelet. Baby boy Matthews, it read, with a birth date 17 years ago. Next to it sat a silver baby rattle, never used, and a lock of dark hair the nurse had given her, the only physical piece of her son she'd ever touched. She sat heavily in the rocking chair, memories washing over her like the rain outside. Had been 28, working as a bank teller, when she discovered she was pregnant. Her boyfriend, Ryan, had vanished when she told him, another deadbeat fleeing responsibility. She'd been determined to raise the baby alone, had prepared. For months had talked to her son every night as he grew within her. Then came the complications during labor. The hemorrhaging, the emergency surgery while she was unconscious. And then, "I'm sorry, Miss Matthews," the doctor had said when she awoke. "We did everything we could." They told her that her son had died during delivery, that his lungs had been underdeveloped, that sometimes these things happened. They'd allowed her a brief goodbye with a tiny bundle that she'd been too drugged, too weak to properly see, but something had always felt wrong about that day. The nurse's averted eyes, the way they'd rushed her through the grieving process, the doctor's refusal to provide detailed records, the burial arranged so quickly she'd barely been conscious for it. Over the years, doubts had crept in. Theories had formed that every inquiry had been stonewalled. Eventually, people told her she was prolonging her grief with conspiracy theories. So she'd stopped asking, but she'd never stopped wondering. The boy at the store tonight, he would be about the right age, 17, with dark hair like hers and eyes that reminded her of her father's. And that birthmark on his wrist, shaped like a crescent moon, Ellie had been born with an identical mark that had faded as she grew older. "You're being ridiculous," she whispered to herself, rocking gently in the chair, clutching the small bracelet. "Lightning doesn't strike like that. Miracles don't happen to people like us." But the dream that had haunted her for 17 years, the one where she heard a baby crying but couldn't find him, no matter how hard she searched, had returned. Last night with new clarity. In the dream, for the first time, she'd followed the cries to a grocery store's back alley. Ellie placed the bracelet back in its drawer and stood. She needed sleep. She had another shift tomorrow night. The boy might return, and if he did, what then? What could she possibly say? "Excuse me, is there any chance you're my dead son?" She closed the nursery door behind her, trying to lock away both the room and the dangerous hope that had awakened within her. Hope was a luxury she'd learned to live without. Hope was the thing that had nearly destroyed her 17 years ago. But as she drifted to sleep, the boy's face remained in her thoughts, and the questions she'd buried for so long rose to the surface like ghosts that would no longer stay contained. Alex clutched the half sandwich against his chest as he navigated the rain-slicked streets. The woman's kindness had been unexpected, suspicious, even. No one gave without wanting something in return. That was the first rule of survival. He ducked through a hole in a chain link fence surrounding an abandoned textile factory on the edge of town. The 3-story brick building had been condemned for years, but the city lacked the funds to demolish it. For Alex and a handful of other teens, it had become an unofficial shelter safer than the streets. Though not by much, he slipped through a basement window, landing with practiced ease on the concrete floor below. Water dripped from his clothes, forming a small puddle at his feet. "That you, Alex?" A voice called from the darkness. "Yeah, it's me." He shook the rain from his hair, brought food. He made his way through the maze of old machinery to a corner, where they'd constructed a makeshift living space. Salvaged furniture, a torn couch, mismatched chairs, milk crates serving as tables created the illusion of home. Battery-powered lanterns cast long shadows across the walls. Lily, 14, and wide-eyed, emerged from behind a stack of pallets they'd fashioned into sleeping quarters. Behind her trailed Zach, barely 12, his face smudged with dirt. "You're soaked," Lily said, tossing him a threadbare towel. Alex handed over the sandwich, which Lily immediately divided into 3 parts. "I already ate," he lied, watching Zach devour his portion in 2 bites. Alex stripped off his wet jacket, revealing a thin frame with ribs visible beneath his t-shirt. A nasty cough had settled in his chest over the past week, but he'd been hiding it from the others. They needed him strong. "Did you check the drop box?" he asked, referring to their arrangement with Corinne, a social worker who bent rules to help. "Kids who'd fallen through the cracks?" Lily nodded. "Some granola bars and new socks. She left a note asking where you've been." Alex grimaced. Corinne had been trying to get him back into the system since he'd run from his last foster home 3 months ago. She didn't understand. He'd rather die than go back. The Hendersons had seemed perfect at first. Big house, nice neighborhood, church every Sunday. But Mr. Henderson had expectations for the boys who passed through his home. Expectations that left bruises where now one could see them. When Alex had caught him looking at Lily during a home visit, he'd decided they needed to disappear. "You getting sick?" Lily asked, noticing his muffled cough. "It's nothing. Just the rain." He retreated to his corner of the basement, separated from the others by a hanging sheet. His space was sparse, a sleeping bag on a foam pad, a backpack containing everything he owned, and a plastic bin where he kept his treasures. Alex opened the bin and added the paper napkin the grocery lady had given him. Stupid, maybe, but small kindnesses were worth remembering. The bin contained odd keepsakes, a subway token from the city where he'd lived until age 6, a smooth rock from the only foster home he'd actually liked, a dog-eared library card from 3 towns ago. At the bottom, wrapped in a washcloth, lay the only possessions he'd had when he entered the system. A faded photograph of a young woman holding a newborn, her face obscured by a shadow, and a small blue baby blanket with stars. Embroidered in one corner, he'd been told these were from his birth mother, though he'd long suspected that was a lie designed to give foster kids some sense of origin. The social workers always seemed uncomfortable when he asked about his birth parents. Abandoned at the hospital was all they would say, but something in their avoidance felt rehearsed. Alex unwrapped the blanket and held it to his face. After all these years, he imagined he could still detect the scent, something floral and faint that triggered a memory too distant to grasp. His chest tightened, triggering another coughing fit. This one brought up phlegm streaked with blood, which he quickly wiped away before the others could see. The fever had been getting worse, but hospitals asked questions, required ID, called authorities. He couldn't risk it not with Lily and Zach depending on him. Tomorrow he'd go back to Save Mart. The dumpsters behind the grocery store were usually full of discarded produce, bruised but edible. Maybe the cashier lady would be there again. Something about her eyes had seemed familiar, almost trustworthy. It was probably a trap, but hunger made people take risks. He laid back on his sleeping bag, listening to the rain hammer against the factory roof, and Lily softly singing Zach to sleep on the other side of the curtain. The sandwich had been good homemade, bread with real turkey, not the processed stuff from convenience stores. His stomach growled, demanding more. Sleep came in fits and starts, interrupted by coughing and shivers that had nothing to do with the damp basement. In his dreams, he was running down hospital corridors, searching for someone calling his name, not Alex, but something else, a name he couldn't quite hear. He woke before dawn, drenched in sweat despite the cool air. The fever was worse. He'd need medicine soon, which meant risking a shoplifting charge at the pharmacy, unless the cashier's face appeared in his mind, the way she'd looked at him with something beyond pity, recognition almost. As if she knew him. It was probably nothing. Just another adult who'd eventually disappoint him. But desperate times required desperate measures, and Alex was running out of options. He coughed into his sleeve, pretending not to notice the bright red stain left behind. He'd go back to Save Mart tonight, not just for food this time, but to see if the strange connection he'd felt with the cashier lady was real, or just another fever dream in a life full of false hopes. For a week, Ellie left food in a plastic container behind the dumpster: turkey sandwiches, apples, granola bars, bottles of water. Each morning when she checked, the container was empty, washed clean, and returned to the same spot. No notes, no personal items left behind, but she knew the boy was coming back. "You're going to get yourself fired," Maria said one night, catching Ellie staring out the window during their shift. Maria had worked at Save Mart for 15 years, long enough to know when someone was breaking rules. "I'm just taking my break," Ellie replied, though her sandwich sat untouched beside her. The boy was out there, watching from across the street. She'd spotted him 10 minutes ago, hovering near a bus stop, pretending to read the schedule. Maria followed her gaze. "That's the dumpster kid, isn't it? Management's been talking about calling the police next time they catch him. He's just hungry." Ellie's voice sharpened. "Look, I get it. You want to help. But there are shelters, programs. He doesn't trust the system. Can't say I blame him." Maria studied her friend's face. This isn't just about a hungry kid, is it? Ellie didn't answer. How could she explain the pull she felt, the way her chest ached when she saw him? How every night she dreamed of her son, that now the baby in her dreams had grown into a teenager with haunted eyes. The boy was still there when her break came. This time, instead of leaving food, she walked directly toward him, pretending not to notice when he stiffened, preparing to run. It's warmer inside, she said, stopping several feet away. He shrugged, feigning indifference. I'm fine. I've got 20 minutes. There's a coffee shop next door. She was surprised when he followed her, maintaining a careful distance. In the fluorescent light of the coffee shop, she could see how thin he was. The dark circles under his eyes, the way he scanned every exit. I'm Ellie, she said, ordering 2 hot chocolates. Alex, he replied after a pause. Alex. Her heart skipped. Alexander was the name she'd chosen for her son, though she'd never told the hospital. It had been her secret, a name whispered to her belly in private moments. Just a coincidence, she told herself. It had to be. Over steaming cups, they established boundaries. She didn't ask why he was homeless. He didn't ask why she cared. Instead, they spoke of safer things: the weather, the annoying morning manager, the stray cat that frequented the alley. You were in foster care? She asked when he mentioned a group home in passing. His eyes narrowed. How'd you know? Lucky guess, she lied. Were you ever adopted? No. Been in the system since I was a baby. He blew on his chocolate, abandoned at County General, supposedly. The cup nearly slipped from Ellie's grasp. County General where? She'd given birth, where they told her baby had died. When's your birthday? The question tumbled out before she could stop it. He stared at her, suspicion returning. Why? Just curious. November 18th, I think. He shrugged. Hospital records aren't always accurate for dumpster babies. November 18th, the day her son was born, the day he allegedly died. Ellie tried to keep her voice casual. You don't know anything about your birth parents? Nope, and I stopped caring a long time ago. His tone suggested otherwise. Their meetings continued through the week. Each night, Ellie's break coincided with Alex's appearance. Their conversations grew longer, more personal. He told her about life on the streets, about the younger kids he looked after. She shared stories of her own struggles, carefully editing out anything that might reveal her suspicions. On the 6th night, rain poured again, turning the parking lot into a lake. Alex appeared at the usual time, soaked and shivering visibly. Get in the car, Ellie said, jangling her keys. Just to warm up. In the confined space of her aging sedan, she could smell the sickness on him, the feverish sweat, the infection settling in his lungs. He needed a doctor, but she knew better than to suggest it. Where'd you grow up? She asked instead, cranking the heater. Bunch of places. Started in Oakdale. Another jolt. Oakdale was her hometown, where she'd lived when she got pregnant. You? Remember anything about it? Not really. I was too young. He rubbed his arms, struggling to get warm. Just that the first family seemed okay. Then I got moved around a lot. As he shifted in his seat, his sleeve rode up, revealing the crescent-shaped birthmark on his wrist. Ellie's identical mark had faded years ago, but she remembered tracing its outline as a child, her mother telling her it was a sign of good luck. What's that? She asked, pointing to his wrist. Born with it, he said, tugging his sleeve down. Only thing I got from whoever dumped me. As rain drummed on the roof, Ellie made a decision. Reaching into her purse, she pulled out the emergency blanket she kept for winter breakdowns. It was blue with white stars embroidered in one corner identical to the blanket she'd bought for her baby 17 years ago. Here, she said, handing it to him. Keep it. Alex took the blanket, his fingers tracing the stars. Something flickered across his face recognition, confusion. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a tattered bundle. As he unwrapped it, Ellie's world tilted on its axis. In his hands was a baby blanket, faded and worn thin with age, but unmistakable. Blue with white stars embroidered in one corner. Her blanket. The one that had disappeared with her son. Ellie couldn't sleep. The image of Alex holding that blanket, her blanket played on endless loop in her mind. It wasn't possible. And yet, there it was. The blanket, the birthmark, the birthday, County General, Oakdale. Too many coincidences when morning came. She called in sick for the first time in 3 years. The County General Hospital Records Department was housed in a basement annex, accessible through a maze of corridors that smelled of antiseptic and old paper. Ellie had been here before, years ago, when her initial suspicions had formed. Back then, they'd stonewalled her, citing privacy policies and missing documents. I'm looking for birth records from November 18th, 17 years ago, she told. The clerk, a young woman who couldn't have been working here when it happened. Patient name, Matthews. Baby boy Matthews. The clerk's fingers clacked on the keyboard. I'm not seeing anything. Are you sure about the date? Positive. I'm his mother. More typing. The only birth record we have for that date under Matthews shows a stillbirth. Is that what you're looking? FOR, stillbirth. Not what she'd been told at the time. They'd said he died shortly after birth, that his lungs had failed. Another inconsistency. Can I see the record? I'm sorry, but you'd need to file a formal request. It takes 2 to 3 weeks. Ellie leaned closer. Please, it's been 17 years. I just need to know what happened to my son. Something in her voice must have reached the clerk, who glanced around before whispering, I can't show you the file, but ... there's something. Odd. The death certificate was filed, but the required doctor's signature is missing. It's just stamped with the hospital seal. Who is the attending physician? The clerk hesitated, then said, Dr. Harrison Wells. Ellie wrote down the name. Dr. Wells hadn't been her doctor. She'd had Dr. Myers, an older woman who'd retired shortly after Ellie's delivery. Why would a different doctor have signed or failed to properly sign her son's death certificate? Outside the hospital, she called Maria. You're going to think I'm crazy, Ellie said when Maria answered. Too late for that warning, Maria replied. What's going on? Ellie explained everything, her suspicions, the blanket, the birthmark, the inconsistencies in the hospital records. Ellie, Maria said when she finished, I love you, but this sounds like wishful thinking. The chances that this random homeless kid is your son, I know how it sounds. But you haven't seen him, the way he moves, the way he talks. It's like looking in a mirror sometimes. And the blanket, Maria, the exact same blanket. Blue blankets with stars aren't exactly unique, and birthmarks are common, not crescent-shaped. One's on the left wrist, Maria sighed. Even if, and this is a huge if, what are you suggesting? That the hospital lied? That they gave your baby away? Or sold him? The silence on the other end stretched. You need to be careful, Maria finally sighed. If you're wrong, you're setting yourself up for heartbreak. And if you're right, someone committed a serious crime. People who do things like that don't just confess when confronted. After hanging up, Ellie drove to the public library. The archives section contained local newspapers dating back decades. She requested everything from November 17 years ago, searching for anything related to County General. 4 hours later, bleary-eyed from scanning microfiche, she found a small article about a hospital administrator being investigated for financial irregularities. The name was different, but the timing aligned with her delivery. The investigation had apparently been dropped for lack of evidence. That evening, Ellie parked across from Save Mart, waiting. She texted her manager claiming food poisoning, buying herself another day off. Alex didn't appear at the usual time. By midnight, worry gnawed at her. He'd been sick, feverish. What if something had happened? She drove to the industrial district where many of the city's homeless congregated. Rain began to fall again as she walked through alleyways, checking doorways and underpasses. No sign of him. A woman pushing a shopping cart eyed her suspiciously. "I'm looking for a teenager," Ellie said. "Thin, dark hair, maybe sick." The woman shook her head. "You a cop?" "No, just worried about him." "Try the old textile factory," the woman said after studying Ellie's face. "That's where some of the kids stay." The factory loomed like a Gothic cathedral against the night sky. Windows broken, chain-link fence surrounding its perimeter. Ellie found the gap Alex must use and squeeze through, tearing her jacket on a protruding wire. "Alex," she called softly, approaching the building. A window slid open above her. A girl's face appeared, suspicious and afraid. "Who are you?" "My name's Ellie. I'm looking for Alex. I'm a friend." The girl disappeared. Minutes later, a side door creaked open. The girl, 14 or 15, Ellie guessed, stood in the doorway, a makeshift weapon in her hand. "He's sick," she said. "Really sick." Ellie followed her through dark corridors to a basement area where a group of kids had created a living space. In the corner, on a nest of blankets, lay Alex. Even in the dim light, Ellie could see the flush of fever on his face, hear the rattle in his chest as he breathed. A younger boy sat beside him, applying a damp cloth to his forehead. "He needs a hospital," Ellie said. "No hospitals," the girl replied fiercely. "They'll call social services, we'll get separated." Ellie knelt beside Alex. His eyes fluttered open, recognition dawning slowly. "Grocery lady," he mumbled. "Ellie," she corrected gently. "You need a doctor, Alex. Can't." He tried to sit up, falling back weakly. "Lily and Zach will figure something out." She turned to the girl, Lily, apparently. "How long has he been like this?" "Got worse yesterday." "He's been coughing up blood." "Pneumonia, possibly." "Dangerous without treatment." Ellie made a decision that could change everything. "I'm taking him to my apartment," she said. "You two can come if you want, but he needs help now." Lily and Zach exchanged glances, the calculus of street survival, evident in their young faces, weighing trust against necessity, risk against Alex's deteriorating condition. "We'll stay here," Lily finally said. "But if anything happens to him, ... The threat hung unfinished as Ellie helped Alex to his feet. He leaned heavily against her, barely conscious, as she guided him through the rain to her car. As she drove, Alex's head lolled against the window, his breathing labored. In the glow of passing streetlights, with his defenses stripped away by fever, he looked heartbreakingly young and unmistakably like the baby she'd dreamed of for 17 years by. The time Ellie maneuvered Alex up the stairs to her apartment, his fever had spiked higher. He was barely conscious, muttering incoherently as she half-dragged him inside. The legal implications of bringing a minor into her home without permission flashed through her mind, but she pushed the thought away. Some things mattered more than laws. "I need to get you into dry clothes," she said. Guiding him to the bathroom. She left him leaning against the counter while she rummaged through drawers for something that might fit. An old set of sweatpants with a drawstring waist, a faded t-shirt from a 5K run years ago. When she returned, Alex had slid to the floor, his back against the bathtub. "Can you change yourself?" she asked. He nodded weakly, accepting the clothes. Ellie retreated to the kitchen, filling a glass with water and searching her medicine cabinet for anything that might help. Over-the-counter pain relievers, cough syrup expired 2 years ago, a thermometer still in its packaging. Not enough. He needed antibiotics, proper medical care. When 15 minutes passed without a sound from the bathroom, she knocked softly. Alex? Number. Answer. She eased the door open to find him changed, but unconscious on the bathroom floor. Panic surged through her as she pressed a hand to his forehead burning hot. Alex, wake up. She tapped his cheek gently, then more firmly. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused. Mom, he mumbled. The word pierced Ellie's heart. She managed to help him to the couch, where he collapsed again into restless unconsciousness. The thermometer read 104.3 degrees Fahrenheit, dangerous territory. She placed cold compresses on his forehead, his wrists, behind his neck, and managed to rouse him enough to swallow some ibuprofen. All the while, her mind raced through options. The emergency room would ask questions. She couldn't answer. A doctor friend might help, but she didn't have one. Maria would know what to do, but calling her meant admitting how far this had gone. Alex thrashed in his delirium, words spilling out in broken fragments. Don single quotes but please. Not the closet again, . Ellie's stomach clenched. What had been done to this boy in the name of care? She soothed, wiping his brow. You're safe now. His eyes opened suddenly, terrifyingly clear. I know you, he said. It's Ellie from the store. No. He gripped her wrist with surprising strength. I've seen you before, in dreams. Then his eyes rolled back, and he began to seize. Everything blurred after that. The 911 call. The paramedics breaking down her door when she couldn't reach it fast enough. The critical questions she couldn't answer. What's his full name? Alex. I don't know his last name. Age? 17, I think. Medical history? I don't know. Are you his guardian? No, yes, ... I'm not sure. The paramedics suspicious. Look, ma'am, what is your relationship to this boy? I'm his mother, Ellie said, the words escaping before she could stop them. I think I'm his mother. They let her ride in the ambulance only after she promised to provide identification at the hospital. As they stabilized Alex, attaching IVs and oxygen, Ellie noticed the backpack he'd been carrying clutched against his side, even in his delirium. She grabbed it before they wheeled him away. In the emergency room waiting area, she sank into a chair, the backpack heavy in her lap. Opening it felt like an invasion, but she needed answers, something to tell the doctors, something to explain her involvement when social services inevitably arrived. Inside, she found the worn blue blanket, a few items of clothing, a toothbrush, worn to nubs, and a plastic bag containing what appeared to be his important documents. A school ID from 3 districts ago, a birth certificate heavily redacted, listing only baby boy Doe and his birth date. And at the bottom of the bag, a hospital bracelet. Ellie's hands trembled as she examined it. Faded but still legible, baby boy Matthews, 11/18, County General. The bracelet she'd been told had been buried with her supposedly dead son. A nurse appeared in the doorway. Ms. Matthews, you can see him now. Alex lay connected to machines and 4 dripping antibiotics into his arm. The doctor, a woman with tired eyes and a gentle manner, met Ellie in the hallway. Severe pneumonia, complicated by malnutrition and exhaustion, she explained. We've started him on broad-spectrum antibiotics. The seizure was caused by the high fever, but we've got that under control now. He's going to need time to recover. Thank you, Ellie whispered. The social worker will be here in the morning. The doctor continued. I understand there's some confusion about his status. Ellie clutched the hospital bracelet in her pocket. Not confusion, a crime. I believe this boy is my son, who I was told died at birth 17 years ago. The doctor's professional demeanor faltered. That's a serious allegation. I know. I have evidence, not conclusive, but enough to justify a DNA test. I see. The doctor hesitated. The social worker will still need to be involved, but I could order the test. As part of his medical workup, the results would take a few days. Thank you, Ellie said again, tears finally breaking through. Can I stay with him tonight? The doctor nodded. I'll have a recliner brought in. Alone with Alex, watching the rise and fall of his chest, Ellie allowed herself to truly consider the possibility that had been growing in her mind. If he was her son stolen sold, funneled into a system that had failed him repeatedly, then he was nearly an adult, shaped by experiences she couldn't imagine. The baby she'd dreamed of was gone forever, replaced by this wounded, distrustful stranger. And yet, watching him sleep, she felt the same fierce protectiveness she'd experienced during pregnancy, the same certainty that they belonged to each other regardless of time or circumstance. Alex stirred, his eyes opening. Clearer now, the fever breaking. Where am I? His voice was raspy from coughing. Hospital. You had a pretty high fever. He tried to sit up, panic flaring. I can't be here. It's okay, Ellie said, gently pressing him back. I'm not leaving you. His eyes narrowed with suspicion. Why are you doing this? The question she'd been dreading. The truth seemed impossible to explain, too fragile to expose to his skepticism. But lies had shaped his entire life. She wouldn't add to them. I found your hospital bracelet, she said, pulling it from her pocket, and I have one just like it at home. For a baby I was told died 17 years ago at County General. Alex stared at the bracelet, then at her face, his expression unreadable. You think I'm your kid? His voice was flat, carefully controlled. I think it's possible. There are too many coincidences. Lady, I've been through 7 foster homes and 4 group homes. You know how many people claim to want me before changing their minds? Why should I believe you're any different? The words stung, but Ellie understood. Hope was dangerous when you've learned to expect disappointment. I'm not asking you to believe anything right now, she said. Just focus on getting better. We can figure out the rest later. He held her gaze for a long moment, then turned away, staring at the ceiling. Whatever, he said, but his hand moved slightly toward hers on the bed, not quite touching, but close enough to feel the warmth between them. Morning brought a flurry of activity to Alex's hospital room. Doctors making rounds, nurses checking vitals, and as promised, a social worker named Karen Williams. Ellie recognized the name immediately from Alex's stories about the woman who tried to help him and the other kids. You must be Ellie Matthews, Karen said, extending her hand. She was younger than Ellie had expected, with kind eyes and an air of weary determination. Alex has mentioned you. He has? Ellie couldn't hide her surprise. He said you were different from most adults. High praise coming from him. Karen glanced at Alex, who was pretending to sleep. We need to discuss his situation. They stepped into the hallway, where Karen didn't waste time on pleasantries. You told the hospital staff you believe Alex is your biological son. That's a significant claim. I know how it sounds, Ellie said, but I have evidence. She explained about the blanket, the birthmark, the hospital bracelet, the coinciding birth date, and the inconsistencies in the hospital records. Karen listened without interruption, her expression carefully neutral. When Ellie finished, she asked, have you spoken with anyone from County General about this? Years ago, when I first suspected something wasn't right, they stonewalled me. And recently, I checked records yesterday. There are irregularities in the death certificate, and the doctor who supposedly handled my case wasn't my doctor at all. Karen made notes in her tablet. The hospital would have a strong interest in covering this up if what you're suggesting is true. Patient trafficking is a serious crime. The doctor ordered a DNA test yesterday. We should have results in a few days. I see. Karen tapped her pen against her tablet. I should tell you that regardless of those results, there are protocols to follow. Alex is still a minor. There would be hearings, evaluations. I understand. Do you? Because Alex has severe trust issues, attachment disorder, probable PTSD. If you're right, if he is your son, he's not the baby you lost. He's a traumatized young man who's learned that adults can't be trusted. Are you prepared for that? The question stung, but Ellie appreciated the woman's directness. I don't have any illusions about this being easy, but I've spent 17 years wondering what happened to my son. If Alex is him, I want a chance to be there for him now, however he needs me to be. Corinne studied her face, then nodded slightly. I've been trying to help Alex for 3 years. He's smart, resilient, and fiercely protective of those he cares about. He's also stubborn, distrustful, and has a habit of disappearing when things get too intense. Just ... be aware of that. What? About the other kids? Lily and Zach? He's worried about them. I know where they are. I'll make sure they're safe. When they returned to the room, Alex had given up his pretense of sleep. Talking about me? He asked, his voice stronger than the night before. Just working out some details, Karen said. You're going to stay here until you're medically cleared, and then we'll discuss next steps. I'm not going back into the system. You don't have many options, Alex. You're 17, but still legally a minor. He looked at Ellie, his expression guarded. What about your place? You said I could stay there. The offer caught Ellie off guard. After their conversation last night, she'd expected more resistance. My apartment is open to you, she said carefully. But there would be conditions from the state, I'm sure. Karen nodded. Temporary emergency placement is possible, especially given the unusual circumstances. But I'd need to conduct a home evaluation, and there would be regular check-ins. Whatever, Alex said, feigning indifference. Better than another group home. After Corinne left, promising to begin the paperwork, an uncomfortable silence settled. Over the room, Alex picked at his hospital bracelet, avoiding Ellie's gaze. Why'd you ask to stay with me? She finally asked Dot. He shrugged. Beats the alternatives. Is that the only reason? His eyes met hers briefly, then darted away. Maybe I want to figure out if you're for real. This whole lost son thing, it's pretty convenient, isn't it? Convenient? Ellie couldn't keep the hurt from her voice. Yeah, like what do you get out of this? Some kind of redemption story? Fix the broken kid to make yourself feel better? That's not. Because I'm not a project, he continued, his voice hardening. And I'm not the baby you lost. That kid never existed. I'm me screwed up, angry, suspicious me. So if you're looking for some cheerful reunion where I call you mom and everything's magically fixed, you should walk away now. Ellie absorbed the verbal blow, recognizing the defense mechanism. You're right, she said finally. I don't know you, and you don't know me. Maybe we're not even related, but I'm not walking away. Alex, not unless you absolutely want me to. He studied her face, searching for the lie, the hidden agenda. Finding none, he seemed almost disappointed. 3 days, he said. I'll try your place for 3 days after I get out of here. Then I decide what happens next. That seems fair. The doctor arrived then, bringing news that Alex was responding well to antibiotics. Another 2 days here, then he should be able to continue recovering at home. Provided he has a home to go to. He does, Ellie said firmly, later while Alex slept. Ellie stepped outside to make a phone call. Her old nursing school friend, Janet, now worked in medical records at a different hospital. I need a favor, Ellie said when Janet answered. Information about a doctor who worked at County General 17 years ago. Harrison Wells? Wells? Janet sounded surprised. He was involved in that scandal, wasn't he? left medicine altogether. Afterward, what scandal? Something about financial irregularities. Nothing was ever proven, but there were rumors. Why are you asking about him? Ellie explained the situation in broad strokes, careful not to sound like the conspiracy theorist others had accused her of being. Jesus, Ellie, Janet breathed when she finished. If you're right, that's monstrous. I need to find him, Janet, or anyone who worked closely with him back then. I can't promise anything, but I'll ask around, discreetly. When she returned to the room, Ellie found Alex awake, staring at the blue blanket she'd brought from his backpack. He didn't look up when she entered. This is the only thing I have from before, he said quietly. They told me my birth mother left it with me when she abandoned me at the hospital. I used to make up stories about her, that she was young and scared or sick and couldn't take care of me, or that she died and someone else brought me in. Ellie sat beside him, her heart aching. I bought 2 of those blankets, she said. One for the hospital, one for home. The stars reminded me of camping with my dad when I was little. Alex traced the embroidered stars with his finger. I always wondered why anyone would bother with stars on a baby blanket. It's not like babies care about astronomy. No, Ellie smiled. But their mothers might. For the first time since she'd met him, Alex's smile reached his eyes, a fleeting, vulnerable thing that vanished almost immediately. But it had been there, a tiny crack in the wall between them. Outside the window, rain continued to fall, washing the city clean as inside. 2 strangers began the delicate work of uncovering a truth buried for 17 years. On the morning Alex was to be discharged, Ellie arrived at the hospital carrying a duffel bag of newly purchased clothes and toiletries. The apartment's 2nd bedroom, the one she'd preserved as a shrine for 17 years, had been transformed overnight. The crib parts stored away, baby items boxed in the closet, walls hastily repainted from baby blue to a neutral gray. She'd worked until dawn, fueled by equal parts anxiety and hope. As she approached Alex's room, she overheard him speaking to someone. I'm not stupid, Karen. I know the DNA test is tomorrow. And if it confirms what Ellie believes? Karen's voice was gentle but direct. Then some doctor stole me from my biological mother and dumped me in the system. Doesn't change anything. It would change your legal status, your birth certificate, your future options. A bitter laugh. Right, suddenly I get a mom and everything's fixed. 17 years of crap just vanishes. Ellie hesitated outside the door, her heart constricting. She'd been so focused on confirming her suspicions that she hadn't fully considered what this revelation might mean for Alex. For him, the truth might not be a rescue, but another burden. Another disruption in a life defined by instability. Taking a deep breath, she knocked before entering. Good news, she said with forced cheerfulness. I got the all clear from the home inspection. Karen smiled, gathering her things. Ellie's apartment is suitable for temporary placement, she told Alex. I'll check in every few days. And remember, you can call me anytime. After Corinne left, Ellie handed Alex the duffel bag, some clothes. Nothing fancy, but better than hospital gowns. He accepted the bag with a murmured thanks, disappearing into the bathroom to change. When he emerged in new jeans and a dark green hoodie, the transformation was striking. With clean clothes and color returning to his face, he looked less like a street kid and more like the teenager he should have been, one with a home, a family, a normal life. Ready? Ellie asked. He nodded, shouldering his old backpack alongside the new duffel. His few possessions, all he had to show for 17 years of life. The drive to Ellie's apartment was quiet, charged with unspoken questions. At a stoplight, she noticed Alex staring at a school they were passing, watching students stream out the doors, laughing and calling to each other. You could go back, she said. Finish high school. I'm pretty far behind. You're smart. You could catch up. He shrugged, turning away from the window. Never saw the point. Not like I was headed to college. Why not? Another shrug. No money, no dress. No one to consign loans. Things change, she said simply. At the apartment. Alex stood awkwardly in the living room while Ellie showed him around. Kitchen, bathroom, her bedroom. And this is your room, she said, opening the door to the freshly painted space. A twin bed with new sheets. A desk with a lamp, a dresser. Simple, impersonal, safe. You didn't have to do all this, he said, setting his bags on the bed. I wanted to. She didn't mention what the room had been before, what it had represented. That conversation could wait. Thanks, he said, the words stiff with disuse. I'll let you get settled. Dinner in an hour. Alone in the kitchen, Ellie leaned against the counter, overwhelmed by the surreality of the situation. A teenager, possibly. Her son was in the next room. After 17 years of grieving an empty grave, of building a life around an absence, suddenly the void had a voice, a face. Opinions. She thought about the parallel tracks their lives had taken. While Alex was bouncing between foster homes, she'd been moving through a series of meaningless jobs and shallow relationships. Nothing had felt important after losing her baby. She'd existed rather than lived, working night shifts because sleeping brought dreams of a crying child she couldn't find. And Alex? What had his life been like, really? His first foster home in Oakdale, had it been good? Had they loved him, this tiny baby with her eyes and the crescent birthmark? What had made them give him up? The second home, the third faceless people who had shaped his earliest memories. The schools he'd attended briefly before being moved again. The lessons he'd learned about attachment, about trust, about his own worth. How many nights had he gone hungry while she ate microwave dinners? Alone? How many times had he been afraid while she worried about mundane things like utility bills and oil changes? How many moments of childhood joy had he missed while she constructed a shrine to a ghost? She was chopping vegetables for dinner when Alex emerged from the bedroom. He'd showered, his hair still damp, curling slightly at the ends, just like hers did. Need help? He asked, hovering at the kitchen entrance. Sure, you can set the table. He moved carefully, hyper-aware of his surroundings, like someone in a museum afraid to touch the exhibits. She recognized the behavior from her own childhood visits to her wealthy aunt's house, the constant fear of breaking something, of taking up too much space, of being too loud, too messy, too present. I don't have a lot of rules, she said as they sat down to eat. Keep your room reasonably clean. Let me know if you're going out. No drugs in the house. He nodded, poking at his food. How long have you lived here? About 10 years. Alone? Yes. Never married. No. Because of ... what happened? The question caught her off guard with its directness. Partly, she admitted. It was hard to move forward when I didn't know the truth, when I felt like a part of me was missing. And now I'm hoping for answers. For both of us. Alex studied her face, searching for something sincerity, perhaps, or the lie he still half expected. They told me I was abandoned, that no one wanted me. The words were like physical blows. That was never true, Ellie said fiercely. If you are my son, and I believe you were stolen, not abandoned. I wanted you more than anything. I still have the nursery I prepared for you. The room I'm in now, she nodded. I repainted it yesterday. I thought ... it might be weird otherwise. A ghost of a smile. Yeah, that would have been weird. After dinner, Alex helped with dishes without being asked, his movements efficient from years of institutional living. Afterward, he retreated to his room while Ellie made phone calls, checking in with Maria, updating Corinne, and leaving another message for Janet about Dr. Wells. Later, passing Alex's door, she heard the soft sounds of an online video, someone explaining algebra concepts. Peering through the crack, she saw him hunched over a notebook, painstakingly working through problems, erasing and rewriting. His face set in concentration, not giving up, she realized. Despite everything, he hadn't given up on himself, in her own room. Ellie opened the closet and pulled out a photo album she hadn't looked at in years. Pictures of herself pregnant, radiant with anticipation. The ultrasound images. The journal she'd kept, writing letters to her unborn child. Parallel lives, one preserved in photographs and mementos, the other lived in hardship and shadow. Tomorrow's DNA test might confirm what she already believed in her heart, but the harder truth remained. Nothing could restore those lost years. No court ruling, no formal acknowledgement could return what had been stolen from both of them. And yet, in the quiet apartment, with the sound of pencil on paper coming from the next room, something new was taking root, fragile, tentative, but real. Not a replacement for what was lost, but a beginning nonetheless. 3 days passed in a careful dance of coexistence. Alex kept to his room, except for meals, emerging occasionally to use the bathroom or get a glass of water. Ellie maintained a respectful distance, fighting every maternal instinct that urged her to hover, to check on him, to make up for 17 years of absence in a single week. The DNA test had been completed, a simple cheek swab for each of them at the hospital. Now they waited, the unspoken question hanging between them like an invisible wall. On the 4th morning, Ellie woke to find Alex in the kitchen, attempting to make pancakes. Flour dusted the counter, and a thin trail of smoke rose from the skillet. "They keep sticking," he said, frustration evident in his voice. "You need more butter in the pan," she replied, fighting a smile. She demonstrated, adding a pat of butter that sizzled and bubbled. Like this, together they salvaged breakfast. Sitting across from each other at the small kitchen table, Alex asked, "Did you work last night?" "I'm on leave for now. Medical family emergency." "Is that what I am? A family emergency?" "For paperwork purposes, yes." He nodded, processing this. "I've been thinking about Lily and Zach. Corinne said they're an emergency placement, but those never last long. You're worried about them? They're good kids. Zach's only 12. He'll get eaten alive in some of the group homes." Ellie considered this. "What if they could visit here? Not to stay, I don't think the state would allow that, but to see you, to know you're okay." Something like hope flickered across Alex's face. "You'd do that?" "Of course. They're important to you." The moment of connection was broken by Ellie's phone ringing. Janet's name flashed on the screen. "I need to take this," she said, stepping into the living room. "Hello?" "Ellie, I found something," Janet said without preamble. "Actually, a nurse who worked with Dr. Wells during that period. She's retired now, but she remembers him, and she remembers some questionable practices. Would she talk to me? That's just it, she wants to. Says she's had suspicions for years, but never enough proof to come forward. Her name's Patricia Clark. I can text you her number." After hanging up, Ellie turned to find Alex standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "Good news?" he asked. "Maybe. A lead about the doctor who might have been involved in." "What happened?" Alex nodded, but something had shifted in his demeanor, a new wariness, a retreat behind his walls. "I'm going back to my room. Alex, I just need some space, okay?" Alone again, Ellie called Patricia Clark and arranged to meet that afternoon at a cafe across town. She knocked on Alex's door before leaving. "I'm meeting someone who might have information," she explained through the door. "I'll be back in a couple of hours. Help yourself to anything in the fridge." No response. The cafe was nearly empty when Ellie arrived. Patricia Clark was easy to spot, a woman in her 70s with silver hair and alert eyes that missed nothing. She recognized Ellie immediately. "You look like him," she said as Ellie sat down. "Your son." "Around the eyes?" The statement, delivered with such certainty, took Ellie's breath away. "You remember him?" Patricia nodded. "November 18th, 17 years ago. I wasn't assigned to your case, but I was on shift. Dr. Wells handled your delivery after complications arose. Your regular doctor, Dr. Myers, had been called away on a family emergency. That's not what I was told. They said Dr. Myers delivered my baby. I'm not surprised." Wells was careful about the paperwork. Patricia sipped her tea. "I didn't know what was happening at the time. It was only later, after other incidents, that I began to connect the dots." "What exactly was he doing?" "Your case was unusual because of the hemorrhaging. You were unconscious for hours. Most of his activities involved mothers who were young, poor, often unmarried. He would tell them their babies had died or been stillborn. Then the babies would disappear, officially recorded as deceased, but actually placed through private adoptions. He sold them," Ellie whispered, "for considerable sums, yes, to couples who couldn't qualify for legal adoption for various reasons: age, criminal history, failed home studies. The babies went to the highest bidders. But why my baby?" "I wasn't young or poor," Patricia hesitated. "There was a couple, wealthy, influential, who had been waiting for a specific type of child. Male, Caucasian, preferably with certain physical features. Your son fit their requirements. And with you unconscious, unable to question what you were told." Ellie's hand shook as she processed this information. "Do you know what happened to him after? Who took him? The Andersons?" "Harold and Elizabeth. They'd been rejected through normal adoption channels because of Harold's age and health issues. They had a home in Oakdale. The first piece of concrete information, a name, a place. Did they keep him? Not for long. Harold died when the boy was about 3. Elizabeth couldn't manage alone and surrendered him to the state. By then, Wells was under investigation for financial irregularities, though nothing about the babies ever came to light. The trail would have gone cold. Why didn't you report this? Why didn't anyone stop him?" Patricia's face creased with old guilt, fear, denial. By the time I was certain what was happening, Wells had left the hospital. There was no proof, just the suspicions of a nurse approaching retirement. Who would have believed me? But I've carried this knowledge for years. When your friend contacted me, I knew it was time. Ellie's mind raced with implications. "Would you testify if this goes to court?" "Yes, it's past time for the truth to come out." With Patricia's contact information saved in her phone and a promise to stay in touch, Ellie drove home, her thoughts churning. Actual names, confirmation of her suspicions, evidence of a criminal conspiracy that had stolen her child and derailed both their lives. The apartment was quiet when she returned. "Too quiet, Alex?" She called, setting down her purse. No answer. His bedroom door stood open, revealing an empty room. The bathroom, kitchen, living room, all vacant. Panic rising, Ellie searched for a note, a sign, anything to indicate where he'd gone or when he'd return. She found it on her bed, a small Amazon package torn open, its contents displayed across. Her comforter, a DNA testing kit she'd ordered the day Alex moved in, a backup in case the hospital results were delayed or compromised. Beside it lay a handwritten note. "Found this in the mail. Guess you didn't trust the hospital test. Or maybe you just don't trust me. Don't worry about the family emergency leave anymore." Ellie sank onto the bed, the note crumpling in her fist. Such a small thing to destroy the fragile trust they'd been building. She'd ordered the test as insurance, never mentioning it to Alex. never considering how it might appear to someone conditioned to expect betrayal. She tried calling his phone, the prepaid one. Karen had provided, but it went straight to voicemail. Next, she called Karen, who promised to check Alex's usual haunts and let her know if he turned up. Hours passed with no word. Evening fell, then midnight. Ellie sat by the window, watching the street below, remembering another vigil 17. Years before, sitting by a nursery window, waiting for a baby who never came home. At 3 a.m., her phone rang. The hospital, Miss Matthews. This is Dr. Rivera. The DNA results for you and Alex Foster are complete. Alex Foster? The surname was new to her. Yes, that's the name in his records. I thought you'd want to know the results immediately, given the circumstances. Yes, Ellie whispered, gripping the phone tighter. Please. The test confirms a parent-child relationship with 99.9% certainty. Alex is your biological son. The confirmation, the validation of what she'd known in her heart should have been a moment of triumph. Instead, alone in her apartment with her son once again missing, it felt hollow, almost cruel. Thank you, she managed. Is everything all right, Miss Matthews? You sound distressed. Alex is missing. He found a backup DNA kit I ordered and thought. He thought I didn't trust him. I see. The doctor's voice softened. Teenagers can be impulsive, especially those with trauma histories. Give him time. Time. The one thing they'd already lost too much of. Ellie hung up and went to Alex's room. Sitting on the edge of his neatly made bed. The dresser remained empty, tags still on most of the new clothes she'd bought him. Nothing personalized. Nothing that indicated he'd begun to think of this space as his own. He'd never planned to stay, she realized. From the beginning, he'd been prepared to run. 3 days, he'd said, and today marked the end of that deadline. On. The nightstand. Something caught her eye, the blue baby blanket, carefully folded. The one thing that had connected them across 17 years of separation, deliberately left behind like a severed tie. Ellie pressed the blanket to her face, inhaling the faint scent that clung to it after all these years. Beneath the dust and where she imagined she could still detect a trace of the baby powder and hospital antiseptic from the day her son was born and stolen. The DNA test had confirmed what she already knew, but the harder truth remained. Biology wasn't enough. Being Alex's mother by birth didn't give her the right to his trust, his affection, his presence in her life. Those things would need to be earned if he ever gave her the chance. For now, all she could do was wait, the blanket clutched to her chest, and hope that somewhere in the darkness, Alex was safe, and remembering that, for a brief moment, he had found something like home. Alex walked until his lungs burned, the familiar tightness returning to his chest. The antibiotics had helped, but he wasn't fully recovered, and the cold night air aggravated his condition. Still, he pushed on, putting distance between himself and the apartment, between himself and the betrayal he should have expected. A backup, and a test. As if the first one wasn't enough. As if she needed extra proof because she didn't really believe or because she thought he was lying somehow. Always the suspicion, always the doubt. He was a fool to have started trusting her. He reached the J. City Park as dawn broke, settling on a bench to catch his breath. His phone had died hours ago, and he'd left the charger behind along with nearly everything else. Just his backpack with a change of clothes, his school ID, and the $43 he'd saved from odd jobs. Not the blanket, though. He'd left that deliberately. A message, a goodbye, rough night, Alex startled. An elderly man sat on the opposite end of the bench, his weathered face creased with a lifetime of similar nights. Something like that, Alex. Muttered. The old man nodded, offering a paper cup. Coffee? It's from the diner across the street. They give me the leftover pot when they brew fresh. Alex hesitated, then accepted. The warmth seeped into his cold hands. "Name's Walter," the man said. "Used to be a high school counselor before my retirement plan took a detour through divorce court and the racetrack." Despite himself, Alex smiled. Slightly. "Alex, running from something or someone?" "How'd you know?" Walter chuckled. "That backpack. Those eyes. The way you keep looking over your shoulder. I've been on the streets 8 years. You learn to read people." Alex sipped the coffee, surprisingly good for dregs. "It's complicated." "Always is." Walter gazed across the park. "Let me guess. Someone offered help. You almost believed them. Then something happened to confirm your suspicion that everyone eventually lets you down?" Alex stared at him. "Are you psychic or something?" "Nah, just old. Seen the pattern enough times." Walter stretched his legs. "Here's what I've learned. People are flawed. They make mistakes. They have selfish motives mixed with genuine ones. But sometimes someone comes along who's worth giving a second chance. You don't know what happened." "True, but I know the look of someone who's walking away from something that matters because I see it in the mirror every morning." Walter stood with a groan. "Well, this old body needs to make its rounds." "Good luck, kid. Hope you find what you're looking for." Alex watched him shuffle away, then pulled out his dead phone, staring at the black screen. Corinne would be worried. Maybe even Ellie, but he couldn't go back. Not after finding that test kit. Not after realizing that he'd been stupid enough to. Hope. Across town, Ellie sat in Maria's kitchen, clutching a mug of tea that had long gone cold. "The DNA test confirmed it," she said, her voice hollow. "He's my son, and now he's gone again." Maria squeezed her hand. "Corinne will find him. He's not exactly invisible, tall, good-looking kid with pneumonia and no resources. Someone will spot him." "I messed up, Maria. I should have told him about the backup tests. You were being cautious." After 17 years of dead ends, who wouldn't be? Ellie shook her head. He saw it as a lack of trust, and he's right. Part of me was still afraid to believe completely, afraid it would all fall apart again. And now? Now I know for certain, and I can't lose him again. Ellie's phone chimed with a text. "It's Janet. She found more information on Dr. Wells." The text contained an address in the suburbs and a brief message. "He's living under the name Harrison Wesley. Retired 10 years ago. Still playing golf at Ridgewood Country Club every Thursday." Ellie stared at the screen, a cold clarity replacing her despair. "I know where Wells is." "Ellie," Maria warned, "whatever you're thinking, he stole my baby. Sold him. Let me grieve an empty grave for 17 years while my son was shuffled through foster homes and eventually ended up homeless. And he's been playing golf. The authorities should handle this. It's a criminal matter, and they will. But first, I'm going to look him in the eye. I need to hear him admit what he did." Maria recognized the steel in her friend's voice. "At least let me drive you." They found Dr. Harrison Wells, now Wesley, stepping out of his luxury sedan in the country club parking lot. At 72, he remained fit, silver-haired, with the confident bearing of a man who'd never been held accountable for his actions. He was retrieving golf clubs from his trunk when Ellie approached. "Dr. Wells." He turned, annoyance flickering across his face at the interruption. "I think you have me confused with someone else. My name is Wesley." "No, you're Harrison Wells, formerly of County General. The doctor who delivered my son 17 years ago and told me he died. The doctor who sold him to a couple named Anderson." The color drained from Wells' face. His eyes darted around the parking lot, finding Maria standing nearby, witnessing the confrontation. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "I have proof, medical records, witness testimony. De-edit confirmation." My son didn't die. You sold him, and now I found him. Wells' demeanor shifted, the facade crumbling. You can't prove anything. Patricia Clark is ready to testify. I have the name of the couple who bought him, and I have my son alive, not dead like you claimed. It was 17 years ago. Wells hissed, glancing nervously at a group of golfers passing nearby. The statute of limitations doesn't apply to child trafficking, Ellie finished. I'm not here to threaten you. I'm here to tell you that the truth is coming out. Today I'm going to the police, the medical board, and the media. Your comfortable retirement is over. Wells' face hardened. The Andersons paid me $50,000 for that baby. They were good people who couldn't have children through normal channels. What I did was merciful placing unwanted children with families who desperately wanted them. My son wasn't unwanted, he was stolen. And the Andersons threw him into foster care when raising him became inconvenient. Something like genuine surprise crossed Wells' face. I didn't know that part. My involvement ended with the placement. Of course it did. You got your money and walked away. Meanwhile, my son spent 17 years thinking he was abandoned. Unwanted, when all along I was searching for him, grieving for him. Maria stepped forward, placing a hand on Ellie's arm. We should go. You've said what you came to say. Wells clutched his golf club like a weapon. You'll regret this. I have connections. So do I, Ellie replied, including a retired nurse, with detailed records and a son who deserves justice. As they walked away, leaving Wells pale and shaken in the parking lot, Maria asked, Feel better? No, Ellie admitted. But it's a start. In the basement of the public library, Alex hunched over a computer terminal. After charging his phone at a fast food restaurant and ignoring 6 missed calls from Karen, he'd made his way here, drawn by a half-formed plan. The search results for County General hospital scandal yielded little, just the vague mentions of financial irregularities Ellie had found. But when he added birth records and missing babies, he discovered a forum for adoptees searching for birth parents. One thread caught his eye: County General Suspicious Adoptions 2000 to 2010. The poster claimed to have evidence that certain babies declared dead at County General had actually been placed through private, off-the-books adoptions. The thread had gone cold years ago, but it contained a crucial piece of information: the location of the hospital's old record storage facility, separate from the main building. Alex wrote down the address. If Ellie was telling the truth, if he really was her stolen son, there would be evidence in those records. Not the sanitized versions she'd been shown, but the real files that would have been preserved for legal purposes. He needed to know for himself, without relying on DNA tests or secondhand accounts. He needed to see proof with his own eyes. As he left the library, Alex paused to look back at the computer where the forum thread remained open. The final post had been written 10 years ago. I know my baby didn't die. A mother knows. Someday, I'll find the truth. Signed, MATT1107. Ellie Matthews. November 2007. She'd never stopped looking for him. Even when no one believed her, even when she must have seemed crazy to everyone around her, she'd kept searching. Alex pushed the thought away. One last investigation, then he'd decide what to believe, what to do, where to go. He headed toward the old records building, unaware that across town, Ellie was taking steps that would bring their separate journeys crashing back together. The police station buzzed with activity as Detective Ramirez reviewed the evidence Ellie had presented. Patricia Clark's sworn statement, the inconsistent hospital records, the DNA test results, and her own account of confronting Dr. Wells. This is substantial, he said finally, leaning back in his chair. If what you're alleging is true, we're looking at multiple felonies. kidnapping, falsification of medical records, fraud. Not to mention the emotional damage. It is true, Ellie insisted, and there may be other victims. Other mothers who were told their babies died when they were actually sold. Ramirez nodded grimly. We'll need to interview Dr. Wells or Wesley, as he calls himself now, and locate any hospital staff who worked with him during that period. What about my son? Alex? According to your statement, he's currently missing? He ran away yesterday. He's 17, still recovering from pneumonia. The social worker is looking for him, but we'll put out an alert. Not as a criminal matter, Ramirez added quickly, seeing Ellie's alarm. As a vulnerable minor who may need assistance. If officers locate him, they'll contact you and the social worker. As Ellie left the station, her phone rang. Curran's number. Any sign of him? Ellie asked without preamble. Not yet. I've checked all his usual spots. The other kids haven't seen him either. Curran paused. But I did speak with one of his former foster mothers. She mentioned that Alex used to talk about finding his hospital records someday, proving he wasn't abandoned. It was like an obsession for a while. Ellie's mind raced. The records building. County General maintains their archives in a separate facility on Westbrook Avenue. You think he'd try to break in there? If he's looking for answers on his own? Yes, I think he might. The County General Records Annex occupied a nondescript brick building surrounded by a chain-link fence. A single security guard monitored the entrance, more concerned with his smartphone than potential intruders. Alex surveyed the building from across the street, formulating a plan. The most obvious entry points would be alarmed, but older buildings often had vulnerabilities, basement windows, service entrances, roof access. He circled the perimeter, spotting a utility ladder on the building's north side, partially hidden by overgrown bush. Perfect. Waiting until the guard disappeared inside for his hourly rounds. Alex sprinted across the street, scaled the fence, and scrambled up the ladder to the roof. A maintenance door there was secured with a padlock, but years on the streets had taught him certain skills. Using a thin piece of metal stripped from his backpack frame, he manipulated the lock until it sprang open. The building's interior was cool and dusty, filled with rows of metal shelving containing boxes of files. Alex moved cautiously, following. Signs to the section marked Obstetrics Maternity Ward, 2000 to 2010. The records were organized by date, then by doctor. He located November 17th years ago, then searched for files under Dr. Wells. There were surprisingly few, just 3 births attributed to him that month. Despite his senior position, Alex found the file labeled Matthews, E-11/18, and opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a standard birth report, noting complications requiring emergency surgery. Attached was a death certificate for baby boy Matthews, with Wells' stamp rather than signature. A handwritten note indicated the body had been released for immediate burial due to the mother's unstable condition. Standard procedure, except for one detail. Tucked into the back of the file was a second form, partially completed, then crossed out, a transfer document authorizing release of the infant to Harold and Elizabeth Anderson of Oakdale. The form bore Wells' actual signature, but lacked a second authorization or the standard hospital release stamp. Alex stared at the document, his heart pounding. This was it proof that Ellie's baby hadn't died, but had been given to the Andersons. Proof that his first foster parents weren't randomly assigned, but specifically chosen by Wells in an off-the-books arrangement. He photographed everything with his phone, then continued searching. In a separate box labeled Administrative Confidential, he found a thin file containing what appeared to be payment records. Coded entries, but clear enough to someone looking for patterns. Dates of births on one side, substantial consulting. Fees on the other. One entry stood out, 11/18, followed by $50,000 from HA. Harold Anderson.Alex was so absorbed in his discovery that he didn't hear the approaching footsteps until it was too late. The security guard appeared at the end of the aisle, flashlight beam cutting through the dim archives. "Hey, what are you doing in here?" Alex shoved the files into his backpack and ran, ducking between shelves as the guard radioed for backup. He made it to a fire exit, slamming through the door and triggering an alarm that wailed through the quiet neighborhood. The ladder he'd used to access the roof was on the opposite side of the building. No time to circle back. He sprinted across the parking lot toward the fence, the guard's shouts fading behind him. Halfway up the fence, a police cruiser pulled into the lot, responding to the alarm. Alex froze, caught in the vehicle's headlights like a deer in the road. "Police, stay where you are." He considered running, but his options were limited in the open street ahead. Officers behind, his lungs already burning from the exertion. Slowly, he climbed down from the fence, raising his hands. Across town, Dr. Harrison Wells, now Wesley, hurriedly packed a suitcase. The confrontation with Ellie Matthews had shaken him more than he cared to admit. If she had indeed gone to the police, his carefully constructed new life would unravel quickly. Retirement in Arizona, perhaps, or better yet, Mexico. Somewhere his medical license or lack thereof wouldn't matter, where his substantial hidden assets could ensure a comfortable existence beyond the reach of American authorities. The doorbell rang. Wells ignored it, continuing to pack. When it rang again, followed by insistent knocking, he peered through the blinds to see 2 police officers standing on his porch. Too late dot at the police station. Detective Ramirez examined the contents of Alex's backpack while the teenager sat handcuffed to a chair, coughing intermittently. "Breaking and entering," Ramirez said, laying out the photocopied files. "Theft of confidential medical records." "Those are serious charges, Mr. Foster." Alex stared at the floor, saying nothing. "Fortunately for you, we have a situation here that's unusual." Ramirez unlocked the handcuffs. "There's someone here to see you." Ellie appeared in the doorway, relief washing over her face. "Alex," he didn't meet her eyes. "They called you?" "Corinne, actually. She figured out where you might have gone." Ellie moved into the room cautiously, as if approaching a wild animal that might bolt. "I've been looking everywhere for you." "I found proof," Alex said, gesturing to the files on the table. "About what happened, about the Andersons." "I know. We found Dr. Wells. He's being questioned now." Ramirez cleared his throat. "In light of the larger investigation and considering the circumstances, we're not pressing charges against you, Alex. But I need statements from both of you about everything you know regarding Dr. Wells' activities." Hours later, after separate interviews detailing everything they'd discovered, Ellie and Alex sat in the station's waiting area. Neither spoke for a long time, the gulf between them seemingly wider than ever, despite the confirmation of their connection. "I shouldn't have run," Alex finally said, his voice low. "It's just ... when I saw that second test kit ... "I should have told you about it," Ellie admitted. "After so many years of disappointment, I was afraid to trust completely. I thought having a backup plan was prudent, but I didn't consider how it would look to you. Trust issues run in the family, I guess." The ghost of a smile touched Alex's lips before fading. "So what happens now?" "That depends on what you want. Legally, the DNA test confirms I'm your biological mother. But you're 17, almost an adult. No court would force you to live with me if you don't want to." Alex studied her face, searching for the agenda, the conditions he'd grown accustomed to expecting from adults. Finding none, he said, "I left some stuff at your apartment." It wasn't a commitment, but it was something. A willingness to return, at least temporarily. Your room is still there, Ellie replied, careful not to push. And I think I can make better pancakes than you. Low bar, Alex muttered, but the tension between them had eased slightly. As they left the station, Ramirez approached with an update. We've arrested Dr. Wells. He's talking, trying to cut a deal. Named 2 other doctors involved in the scheme. This is going to be bigger than we thought. Will there be a trial? Ellie asked, eventually. It's going to take time to build the case, identify other victims. You'll both need to testify. Alex nodded, his expression hardening. Good. I want to look him in the eye when they sentence him. Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the parking lot. Alex paused, looking up at the sky as if seeing it for the first time. I've been carrying this weight my whole life, he said quietly. The feeling that I was thrown away, that no one wanted me, and now, you know that's not true, Ellie finished. You were wanted. You were wanted. He didn't respond, but as they walked to her car, he stayed close beside her, their shadows merging on the pavement behind them. Rain pelted against the windows as Alex stood on Ellie's doorstep, hesitating before the threshold. The last time he'd crossed it, he'd been a stranger with pneumonia. Now he returned as someone else, entirely her son, confirmed by science and documentation, linked by blood and a shared history of loss. You don't have to stay, Ellie said softly behind him. This isn't a trap. He stepped inside, shaking rain from his hair. The apartment looked the same, yet somehow different, less like a temporary shelter and more like a place he needed to decide about. 3 days, he said, echoing his original agreement. I'll stay 3 more days, and then we'll see. Ellie nodded, careful to hide her relief. 3 days was better than nothing. Better than losing him again. Alex retreated to his room, finding it exactly as he'd left it, including the blue blanket he'd deliberately abandoned. He picked it up, running his fingers over the embroidered stars. A knock at the door. Ellie stood there, holding a tray with soup and crackers. Thought you might be hungry, she said. And you're still recovering. He accepted the tray with a murmured, thanks. As she turned to leave, he said, the hospital blanket, it's the same as this one. Yes, I bought 2, one for the hospital, 1 for home. Did you embroider the stars? She smiled, surprised by the question. No, they came that way. But I chose them because they reminded me of camping with my dad when I was little. He taught me all the constellations. Alex looked at her directly. I used to do that sometimes. Find places outside the city where I could see the stars. Make up my own constellations when I couldn't remember the real ones. The small connection, this shared affinity for stars hung between them like a fragile thread. Get some rest, Ellie said, not wanting to push. We can talk more tomorrow. After she left, Alex ate the soup homemade, not canned, and stared out the window at the rain-slicked streets below. The files he'd stolen from the records building had been confiscated by the police, but their contents were seared into his memory. The proof he'd sought for years, concrete evidence that he hadn't been abandoned, that his placement in foster care wasn't the result of a mother's rejection, but a doctor's greed. 17 years of believing a lie. He pulled out his phone, now charged, and opened the photos he'd taken of the documents. One detail kept drawing his attention. The Andersons had paid $50,000 for him. More than a year's salary for most people. They'd wanted him that badly, had broken laws to get him, only to surrender him to the state 3 years. Later, when the arrangement became inconvenient, it made no sense. Why go to such lengths to acquire a child, only to give him up? A text message interrupted his thoughts. Lily, Karen says you're okay. Living with grocery lady, true? He replied, yes, complicated. We'll explain. You and Zach safe? Foster home in Oakdale? Separate rooms, but same house. They have a dog. Could be worse. Oakdale, the town where the Andersons had lived, where he'd spent his first 3 years. The coincidence felt significant somehow, as if his life were circling back to its beginning. "We'll visit soon," he texted, then set the phone aside, suddenly exhausted. The events of the past days, the running, the breaking and entering, the confrontation with police, the revelations had drained him completely. He lay back on the bed, still fully clothed, and was asleep within minutes. He dreamed of hospital corridors, of running through endless hallways, searching for something he couldn't name. A baby's cry echoed from somewhere ahead, but every time he turned a corner, the sound receded further. Then suddenly Ellie was there, running alongside him, her hand reaching for his. "This way," she said, leading him toward a door he hadn't seen before. Alex woke with a start, disoriented in the dark room. For a moment, he couldn't remember where he was, which foster home, which shelter, which temporary placement. Then it came back to him, Ellie's apartment, his mother's home, his mother. The phrase still felt foreign, unnatural. He'd spent years hardening himself against the concept of parents, against the longing for family that had only brought disappointment. And now, suddenly, he had a mother, one who hadn't abandoned him, who had been searching for him all along. Wasn't ready to trust it. Trust led to vulnerability, and vulnerability to pain. Better to maintain distance, to observe and analyze before allowing himself to believe. Morning brought a tentative routine. Ellie made breakfast proper pancakes this time, light and fluffy, while Alex set the table without being asked. They ate in relative silence, each hyper-aware of the other's presence. "I need to go to the store later," Ellie said finally. "Do. You need anything?" Alex shook his head. "I'm going to visit Lily and Zach." Karen texted the address. "In Oakdale?" When he looked surprised, she added, "You left your phone on the kitchen counter. I saw the notification." "Yeah, foster home there." He hesitated. "It's where I lived. When I was little, with the Andersons, I guess so." "I don't really remember them." Ellie set down her coffee cup. "I could drive you, if you want." The offer hung between them, a small overture, a chance for shared experience. "Okay," Alex said after a moment. "Thanks." The drive to Oakdale took 30 minutes, the tension in the car gradually easing as they left the city behind. Rolling hills and farmland stretched on either side of the highway, interspersed with clusters of suburban development. "I grew up here," Ellie said as they passed the town limits. "Left for college, came back when I got pregnant. My parents had moved away by then, but it felt like the right place to raise a child." Alex watched the familiar landscape slide past. "It's quiet, too quiet sometimes. That's why I moved to the city after what happened at the hospital. Too many memories here." They located the foster home easily, a modest ranch-style house with a well-maintained yard and a basketball hoop in the driveway. Lily and Zach burst out the front door as soon as Alex stepped from the car. "You're alive," Zach exclaimed, flinging his arms around Alex's waist. "Chris, I'm alive, squirt." Alex ruffled the boy's hair, his usual guardedness softening. "Told you I'd be fine." Lily held back, eyeing Ellie suspiciously. "Is that her, the grocery lady?" "Yeah, Ellie Matthews." Alex hesitated, then added, "My biological mother?" Lily's eyes widened. "For real? Like, for real, for real?" Gina confirmed. Alex glanced at Ellie, who had remained by the car, giving them space. "It's a long story." "We have time," Lily said, crossing her arms. "Corinne said we could have visitors all afternoon." As the kids led Alex inside, Ellie called, "I'll be back in 2 hours. Take your time." Alex paused, looking back at her. The casual observer might have missed it, but Ellie caught the flash of gratitude in his eyes, appreciation for the space, for the lack of pressure, for the simple respect of allowing him this reunion on his own terms. With time to herself, Ellie drove through her old hometown, past the high school she'd attended, the park where she'd first felt her baby kick inside her, the small house she'd rented during her pregnancy. Finally, she stopped outside a sprawling colonial-style home in the town's most affluent neighborhood, the Anderson house, where her son had spent his first 3 years. She sat in her car, studying the manicured lawn, the expensive cars in the driveway, the pristine exterior that revealed nothing about the family who'd purchased her baby. According to police records, Elizabeth Anderson still lived here, remarried to a local businessman after Harold's death. The woman who had briefly been Alex's mother, who had held him, fed him, watched his first steps, was just behind those walls. The temptation to knock on the door, to confront this woman as she had Dr. Wells, was nearly overwhelming. But Ellie resisted. This moment wasn't about her need for closure or justice. It was about Alex's journey back to the people who mattered to him now. 2 hours later, she returned to the foster home. Alex was shooting baskets with Zach while Lily sat on the porch steps supervising. Something in his demeanor had changed to lightness, as if sharing his story with these children who knew him at his worst had lifted a burden on the drive home. Alex broke the silence. The foster parents seemed decent. Strict rules, but fair. They let Lily and Zach share the family computer for homework. That's good, yeah. He stared out the window as they passed a small playground. I used to play there when I was little. Ellie glanced at him, surprised by the voluntary disclosure. I remember the sandbox, he continued, and that weird spring-mounted dinosaur thing. I had a babysitter who would take me there sometimes. Mrs. Anderson was always too busy. You remember her? Not really her face, just ... impressions. She wore perfume that made me sneeze. She didn't like messes. After Mr. Anderson died, she started leaving me with the babysitter more. Then one day, different people came and took me to a new house. The matter-of-fact recounting of his first displacement hit Ellie like a physical blow. I'm sorry, she whispered. Not your fault. Still. They drove in silence for several miles before Alex spoke again. Corinne texted while I was with Lily and Zach. The police interviewed Elizabeth Anderson Trent today. She admitted everything, the payment to Wells, the illegal adoption. Said she didn't know about the other babies, just that Wells could get them a child when normal adoption channels had rejected them. Did she say why they gave you up? Alex's jaw tightened. Apparently, Harold had life insurance that covered her lifestyle. After he died, she couldn't maintain it with a kid in the picture. Priorities. The bitterness in his voice was palpable, unjustifiably so. Ellie reached across the console, hesitantly placing her hand on his arm. Her loss, she said simply. To her surprise, he didn't pull away. That evening, as storm clouds gathered again. Outside, they sat in the living room watching a movie neither was paying attention to. The proximity felt significant, not quite comfortable, but no longer awkward. When thunder crashed overhead, rattling the windows, Alex asked, Did you ever think about giving up on finding me? Ellie considered the question. There were times when it seemed impossible, when everyone told me I was delusional, that I needed to accept reality and move on. But no, I never truly gave up. Why not? Because I felt you were out there. It wasn't logical or rational. I just knew. Alex nodded slowly, as if her answer confirmed something he'd been wondering. I used to have this recurring dream. Someone calling my name, not Alex, but something else I could never quite hear. For a long time, I thought it was just my brain making up what it would be like to have a mother who wanted me. I used to dream about you too, Ellie admitted. A baby crying somewhere I couldn't reach. As you got older, the baby in my dreams grew into a child, then a teenager, always just out of sight. The shared experience hung between them, not quite a connection, but the possibility of one, a recognition that perhaps on some level beyond logic or science, they had remained linked despite everything that had separated them. "I was going to name you Alexander," Ellie said softly, "after my grandfather. I never told anyone at the hospital. It was my private name for you." "Alex," he repeated, as if hearing it anew. "Alexander Matthews, only if you want it," she added quickly. "You've been Alex Foster for 17 years? That's your identity." "Foster was assigned by the system. It's not real." He stared at his hands. "Nothing about my life has been real. It's all been based on a lie." "Not all of it," Ellie countered. "The person you've become, your strength, your resilience, your loyalty to Lily and Zach, that's real. The choices you've made, good and bad, are yours. The name you choose now can be yours too." The storm intensified outside, rain lashing against the windows as if trying to wash away the past, clear the ground for whatever might grow next. In the flickering light of the television, mother and son sat side by side, not touching but close enough to feel each other's presence. Two people finding their way back to a connection that had been severed, but never truly broken. 2 weeks passed in a delicate dance of coexistence. Alex's promised 3 days came and went without mention. His continued presence a silent acknowledgement that something had shifted between them. Each morning, Ellie expected to find him gone, his few possessions packed and the door left ajar. Each evening, the relief of seeing him still there felt like a small victory. They established cautious routines. Breakfast together before Ellie left for work. She'd return to Save Mart on the night shift, unable to extend her leave indefinitely. Dinner when she got home, sometimes prepared by Alex, who had discovered an unexpected aptitude for cooking. The spaces between filled with careful conversation, like excavators working around fragile artifacts. "Corinne called," Alex said one morning, pushing scrambled eggs around his plate. "They want me to testify at the preliminary hearing next month." "About the records I found?" Ellie nodded. "Detective Ramirez mentioned that might happen. Are you okay with it?" "Yeah, I want to do it." He took a bite, then added, "She also said they've identified 3 other cases. Babies Wells declared dead who were actually placed through his private adoption scheme." "Other families like us," Ellie murmured. "Not exactly like us." The other mothers were all teenagers, single, financially unstable, easier targets. The implication hung unspoken. Unlike Ellie, who had been unconscious after complications, an opportunity rather than a target. "The DNA test results came through officially," Ellie said, changing the subject. "From the hospital. Would you like to see them?" Alex considered this. Maybe. Not today, but yeah, eventually. Another small step forward. Ellie hid her smile behind her coffee cup later that week. Corinne visited for their scheduled check-in. She arrived with a stack of paperwork and a cautiously optimistic demeanor. "You're looking better, Alex," she noted, settling at the kitchen table. "How's the living arrangement working out?" Alex shrugged. "Fine." "More than fine," Ellie added. "He's been helping around the apartment, cooking sometimes. Even fixed the leaky faucet in the bathroom." Karen smiled. "Good to hear. Now we have some legal matters to discuss. The DNA confirmation opened several pathways forward." She explained the options: official recognition of Ellie as Alex's biological mother, restoration of her legal parental rights, correction of his birth certificate and legal name. "Since you're 17, the court will consider your preferences heavily," Corinne told Alex. "There's no requirement that you change your name or living situation if you don't want to." "And after I turn 18?" Alex asked. "Then all decisions are entirely yours." He nodded, absorbing this. "What about the investigation? The other families?" Progressing. Dr. Wells is cooperating, naming names. The district attorney is building a case that could involve multiple charges: kidnapping, fraud, falsification of records. Will it be public? Ellie asked. In the news. Most likely. A baby trafficking ring operating through a major hospital. It's significant. Are you concerned? About privacy? Ellie glanced at Alex. I'm concerned about him. He didn't ask for any of this. I can handle it, Alex said firmly. If it helps the other families, I'll do whatever interviews they need. After Corinne left, Alex retreated to his room, still his refuge when conversations became too intense. Ellie gave him space, understanding the need for boundaries. Later, she knocked softly on his door. Yeah? He called. She opened it to find him at the desk, textbook spread before him, studying GED prep. Karen brought the materials last week. Another surprise. That's great. Figured I might as well. Not much else to do. Ellie leaned against the door frame. I was thinking of inviting Maria over for dinner this weekend. She's been asking to meet you properly, not just as the kid behind the store. Alex looked up, wariness flashing across his face. Why? Because she's my best friend. Because she's known about you or the absence of you for 17 years. Because she's one of the few people who never told me I was crazy for believing. You were alive. He considered this, then nodded. Okay, another small victory. The dinner with Maria went better than expected. She arrived bearing gifts, a vintage video game console she'd found at a thrift store, complete with cartridges. Ellie mentioned you were interested in programming, Maria explained as Alex examined the ancient Nintendo. Thought you might enjoy. Seeing where it all started, his genuine enthusiasm broke through his usual reserve. For hours, the three of them took turns playing Mario Brothers, Ellie revealing unexpected competitive skills, Maria sharing stories of teenage Ellie that made. Alex laughed despite himself. She was so stubborn, Maria recounted. Once she decided something, that was it. No changing her mind. Still true, Alex commented, earning a mock-offended look from Ellie. You should have seen her when she was pregnant with you, Maria continued. Reading every baby book, painting the nursery 3 times because the shade of blue wasn't exactly right. Alex's smile faded slightly. You knew her then? Since high school? I was there through everything, the pregnancy, the hospital, the aftermath. When everyone else thought she needed to move on, I knew better. Ellie doesn't give up on what matters to her. The words landed with quiet significance. After Maria left, Alex helped clean up in thoughtful silence. Your friend's cool, he finally said. She is. She never doubted me, even when I doubted myself. What was it like, he asked suddenly, after the hospital? When you thought I was dead? Ellie stilled, unprepared for the direct question. It was ... empty, like someone had carved out everything inside me and left just enough to keep breathing. People expected me to grieve and then recover, but how do you recover from losing a part of yourself? So you didn't recover. Not in the way they wanted. I functioned. I worked. I existed. But there was always this feeling that something wasn't right, that the story I'd been told wasn't true. Alex leaned against the counter. I used to wonder about my birth mother. Make up stories about who she was, why she left me. Sometimes I imagined she was dead because that was easier than thinking she just didn't want me. I wanted you, Ellie said softly. Every day for 17 years. He nodded, not meeting her eyes, but accepting the truth of her words. Another small step across the gulf between them. The days continued their careful rhythm. Alex studied for his GED, occasionally asking Ellie for help with subjects that challenged him. Ellie returned to work, bringing home stories of difficult customers and Maria's latest dating disasters. They watched movies, cooked meals. occupied the same space with increasing comfort, and they waited for the preliminary hearing, for the media attention that would inevitably come, for the legal process of reconnecting what had been severed. "You don't have to decide anything now," Ellie told Alex one evening as they watched the news report on Dr. Will's case. "About your name, about where you'll live after you turn 18. "There's time, I know," he said. Then, after a pause, "But I've been thinking about it, about being Alexander Matthews." Hope bloomed in Ellie's chest, but she kept her voice neutral. "And it feels ... right, somehow, like putting on clothes that actually fit instead of hand-me-downs." It wasn't a declaration, not yet. But like everything between them, it was a beginning, a tentative step toward a future neither had dared imagine possible. The email arrived on a Thursday afternoon while Alex was home alone, studying for his GED practice test. The notification chimed softly on Ellie's laptop, which she'd left open on the kitchen table. Normally, he would have ignored it, respecting the boundaries they'd established. But the subject line caught his eye: DNA relationship test results complete. He stared at the notification, his heart suddenly racing. They'd already received verbal confirmation from the hospital that these were the official detailed results, the scientific documentation of his identity, his origin, his connection to Ellie. His finger hovered over the trackpad. Should he wait for Ellie to return from grocery shopping? This was her email, her information too. But the results were equally the answer to questions that had shaped his entire existence. The apartment door opened before he could decide. Ellie appearing with bags of groceries. "Hey, can you grab the last bag from the car?" she asked, setting her load on the counter. "Your email," he said instead. "The DNA results are here." Ellie froze, a box of pasta halfway to the cupboard. "Oh, I didn't open it," he added quickly. "Thought we should ... together." She nodded, setting down the pasta. "Let me just get that last bag." The mundane task of bringing in groceries created a buffer, a moment to prepare for whatever the email contained, though they both knew what it would say. The preliminary results had been clear enough. When the groceries were put away, they sat side by side at the kitchen table, the laptop before them. "Ready?" Ellie asked. Alex nodded, his mouth suddenly dry. The email was clinical and direct, with a PDF attachment containing the full report. Ellie clicked it open, revealing pages of scientific terminology, charts, and statistical analyses. At the bottom of the first page, highlighted in bold, probability of maternity, 99.997%. The alleged mother, Ellie Matthews, cannot be excluded as the biological mother of the tested child, Alex Foster. Based on the analysis of genetic markers, the probability of maternity is 99.9997%. There it was. Scientific certainty. Irrefutable. Proof of what they'd already come to accept. "Well," Ellie said softly, "that's that." Alex stared at the number, 99.997%. Not quite 100% science. Always left room for the infinitesimal possibility of error, but as close to absolute certainty as human knowledge could provide. "Can I have a copy?" he asked. "Of course, it's your report too." Ellie forwarded the email to his phone, then closed the laptop. "How do you feel?" The question was simple but profound. How did he feel knowing with scientific certainty that the woman beside him had given birth to him? That he hadn't been abandoned but stolen? That the narrative that had defined his self-image for 17 years was built on lies? "I don't know," he admitted, validated, I guess, but also ... angry. "At me?" "No, at everyone else. The system, the doctors, the people who were supposed to protect kids like me." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Ellie had come to recognize as a sign of emotional turmoil. 17 years of feeling unwanted, and it was all based on a lie. I'm sorry, Ellie said, the words inadequate but necessary. Not your fault. Still, if I had pushed harder, asked more questions, they would have stonewalled you anyway, Alex cut in. Wells had the whole thing set up, false records, missing documents. You were just one person up against a system designed to protect itself. His defense of her was unexpected, touching in its empathy. For a brief moment, he'd placed himself in her position, imagining her struggle rather than focusing solely on his own. What happens now? He asked. Legally, I mean. Corinne said we can petition for a corrected birth certificate. Your legal name can be changed if you want, though that would be a separate process. And there's the matter of formal recognition of parental rights, though, with you nearing 18, that's somewhat symbolic. Would my last name be Matthews? Or would I keep Foster? That's entirely your choice. You could also hyphenate if you wanted elements of both identities. Alex considered. This, Alexander Matthews, he said, testing the sound of it. Alex Matthews, it suits you, Ellie said carefully. But Alex Foster is who you've been for 17 years. There's no wrong answer. Foster was assigned by the system. It's not connected to any actual family. He traced a pattern on the table. With his finger, Matthews would be ... real, a real connection. The implication that he was considering embracing her name, her family sent a wave of emotion through Ellie that she struggled to contain. Whatever you decide, she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil within. The connection is already real. The DNA just confirms what we already knew. Alex nodded, his eyes on the closed laptop, as if he could still see the report with its definitive conclusion. There's something else, Ellie said after a moment. Something I've been waiting to show you until we have the official results. She disappeared into her bedroom, returning with a small wooden box. Opening it, she removed a silver frame containing an ultrasound image. This is you, she said, handing it to him, 20 weeks. The technician said you were sucking your thumb. Alex stared at the grainy black and white image, the earliest picture of himself in existence. A tiny profile, a curved spine, the suggestion of a hand near what must have been his face. I talk to you every day, Ellie continued softly, played music, read books aloud. The doctor said you probably couldn't hear yet, but I thought maybe you could feel the vibrations, know you weren't alone. Alex traced the outline of the ultrasound with his finger, his expression unreadable. Then, unexpectedly, he asked, do you have others? Pictures from when you were pregnant? Ellie nodded, emotion tightening her throat. A whole album. Could I see them sometime? Of course, whenever you want. He returned the ultrasound carefully to the box. I should finish studying. GED practice test is tomorrow. The abrupt change of subject might have seemed dismissive to someone who didn't know him. But Ellie had learned to recognize his patterns, the retreat when emotions became too intense, the need for space to process. Sure, she said. I'll start dinner in about an hour. As he headed toward his room, he paused in the doorway. Thanks, he said, not turning around. For not giving up. For believing I was out there somewhere. Before she could respond, he disappeared into his room, the door closing softly behind him. Alone in the kitchen, Ellie allowed the tears she'd been holding back to fall. Tears not of sadness, but of release of validation after 17 years. Of being told she was wrong, delusional, unable to accept reality. The DNA test hadn't told her anything she hadn't already known in her heart, but its official confirmation represented something profound. The end of doubt, the beginning of certainty. Son was alive. He was here. And slowly, cautiously, they were finding their way toward each other. That evening, as they ate dinner, Alex seemed preoccupied, pushing food around his plate more than eating it. Nervous about the test tomorrow? Ellie asked. No, well, maybe. A little. He set down his fork. Actually, I've been thinking about what happens after if I pass the GED. College. Trade school. There are lots of options. Yeah, but they all cost money. And I know you've already done a lot letting me stay here. Buying clothes and stuff, double quotes. Ellie set down her own fork. Alex, listen to me. Money for your education is not an issue. I've been saving for 17 years for you. That fund exists whether you lived with me or not. It's yours. He stared at her. You've been saving? Even when you thought I was dead, I couldn't stop. Somehow it felt like if I kept putting money aside for your future, it meant you had one. Somewhere. The logic made no sense, she knew. It had been a form of denial, perhaps, or magical thinking. But the result was tangible, a college fund that had grown steadily over 17 years, waiting for a child she'd been told would never use it. Oh, Alex said simply, the single syllable containing multitudes later, as she passed his partially open door. Ellie saw him sitting on his bed, staring at his phone. The PDF of the DNA results was open on the screen, the number 99.997% glowing in the dim light. Some truths took time to fully absorb, she knew. The scientific fact of their connection was just the beginning, the foundation upon which everything else would be built, one careful step at a time. The courthouse steps teemed with reporters, their cameras and microphones creating a gauntlet Alex and Ellie would have to navigate. News of Dr. Wells' baby-trafficking operation had broken nationally, with all the sensationalism such a story invited. Dr. Death, stolen lives, cradle conspiracy. We don't have to talk to them, Ellie said as they sat in the parked car, watching the media circus. Detective Ramirez said the side entrance is clear. Alex stared at the reporters. No, I want to do this through the front. I'm not hiding. His determination didn't surprise her anymore. In the months since the DNA results had confirmed their relationship, Alex had grown increasingly resolute about confronting the truth publicly. He'd given a detailed statement to the district attorney, agreed to testify at the trial, and even consented to a single carefully controlled interview with a respected journalist, all with a poise that belied his 17 years. Okay, Ellie. Sad. Together then. They exited the car and approached the courthouse. The reporters surged forward at the sight of them, questions overlapping in a cacophony. Ms. Matthews, how does it feel to be reunited with your son after 17 years? Alex, did you suspect your foster care placement was based on a lie? What do you hope happens to Dr. Wells today? Alex walked straight ahead, his expression composed, one hand lightly touching Ellie's elbow in a protective gesture that moved her deeply. At the top of the steps, he paused, turning to face the cameras. We'll have a statement after the hearing, he said clearly. Right now, we're here for justice, not just for our family, but for all the others affected by Dr. Wells. Actions. Inside, the courtroom was already crowded. Karen waved them forward to seats reserved in the front row. Beside her sat Patricia Clark, the retired nurse whose testimony had been instrumental in building the case. The other families are here? Karen whispered, nodding toward three women seated together across the aisle. They all received confirmation from the DNA registry last week. Their children were located. Alex studied the women, all former teenagers, who had been told their babies died at birth, all from disadvantaged backgrounds, all victims of Wells' calculation that they would lack the resources or credibility to challenge the hospital's authority. Where are their children? He asked. 2 are adults now, living in other states. They've been notified but hadn't decided whether to meet their birth mothers. The third was too young to be told, yet only 7. His adoptive parents are cooperating with a transition plan. The bailiff called the court to order as Judge Harmon entered. Dr. Harrison Wells, now stripped of his medical license, was led in wearing an orange jumpsuit, his arrogance diminished by the reality of his situation. The proceedings moved quickly. Wells had accepted a plea deal, agreeing to provide evidence against 2 other doctors and a hospital administrator involved in the scheme. In exchange, he would receive a reduced sentence, 15 years instead of the potential 30 he faced if convicted at trial. When given the opportunity to address the court, Wells offered a clinical apology that focused more on his professional disgrace than the human impact of his crimes. He spoke of errors in judgment and ethical boundaries crossed. Avoiding the stark language of theft and trauma, the judge was unimpressed. Dr. Wells, you have violated the most fundamental trust placed in the medical profession. You stole children from their mothers at their most vulnerable moments, falsified death certificates, and profited from unimaginable grief. While I am bound by the terms of your plea agreement, let me be clear. 15 years is insufficient punishment for the lives you have damaged. When the hearing concluded, Wells was led away without looking at his victims. Outside, the promise statement to the press fell to Ellie as Alex suddenly found himself unable to speak, the emotions of the day catching up with him. Today marks the beginning, not the end of justice, Ellie told the assembled cameras. No. Sentence can restore the years stolen from us, but the truth has finally come to light. We hope other families separated by similar schemes will be encouraged to seek answers, and that institutions will be held accountable for protecting the vulnerable rather than the powerful. Later, at a cafe away from the courthouse, Alex finally spoke. 15 years isn't enough. No, Ellie agreed. But he'll be elderly when he gets out. His reputation is destroyed. His assets frozen for restitution. And most importantly, the truth is known. What about the Andersons, Elizabeth Anderson Trent? She paid for me. Shouldn't she be charged too? Corinne, who had joined them for lunch, answered carefully. The day considered it. The problem is proving criminal intent. She claims she believed it was a legitimate private adoption, expedited due to her husband's health issues, without evidence that she knew about the falsified death certificates. She had to know something wasn't right, Alex insisted. The secrecy, the cash payments, the lack of paperwork. I agree, Karen said, but legally it's complicated. She's cooperating with the investigation, which counts in her favor. Alex absorbed this, his jaw tight with frustration. So she just gets away with it after everything? Not entirely, Ellie said. There will be civil proceedings. And more importantly, her role in this is public now. Everyone knows what she did and what she was willing to discard when it became inconvenient. The bitterness of this truth hung over the table. Elizabeth Anderson Trent, who had paid $50,000 for a baby, then surrendered that child to the state when he no longer fit her lifestyle, would face social consequences but little legal accountability. I want to meet her, Alex said suddenly. Ellie and Karen exchanged surprised glances. Are you sure? Corinne asked. There's no obligation to, I know, but I need to see her, ask her some questions for myself. The determination in his voice made clear this wasn't a passing impulse, but a considered decision. Part of his journey toward understanding his fractured past. I'll arrange it, Karen promised. If she agrees. 2 days later, Alex sat across from Elizabeth Anderson Trent in a private room at Karen's office. Ellie waited outside, respecting his wish to conduct this meeting alone. Elizabeth was in her 60s now, elegantly dressed, her composed exterior belying her evident nervousness. She had agreed to the meeting after consulting her lawyer, perhaps hoping it might help her position in the upcoming civil proceedings. You've grown into a handsome young man, she said by way of greeting. You have your mother's eyes. Which Mother? Alex asked coolly. She flinched slightly. I deserve that. Why did you do it? Pay for a baby that wasn't legally available? Elizabeth sighed, smoothing her skirt. Harold was dying, cancer. We'd been trying to adopt for years. But his age and health made us ineligible through normal channels. Dr. Wells approached us after Harold's oncology appointment. Said he could arrange a private adoption quickly. No red tape. We were desperate for Harold to experience fatherhood before he died. And the money? $50,000? Wells called it a facilitation fee. I knew it wasn't entirely above board, but I convinced myself it was just expediting the process, not down what it actually was. Did you know about the death certificates? That the mothers were told their babies had died? No, she said, with what appeared to be genuine horror. Not until the investigation. I swear, I thought you were truly unwanted, that your mother had chosen to give you up. Alex studied her face, searching for deception. And after Harold died? Why give me up? The question seemed to unsettle her more than the others. I wasn't coping well with his death. Depression, the doctors called it. I couldn't care for myself, let alone a child. My family thought it best ... best to throw me into the system, where I bounced between 7 foster homes and 4 group homes, where I ended up homeless at 16. Elizabeth's composure cracked, tears welling in her eyes. I'm sorry, I truly am. What happened to you after? I never knew. I should have checked, should have made sure you were placed with a good family. But you didn't. No, I didn't. Her hands trembled. I've thought about you over the years. Wondered where you were, if you were happy. One kept a few pictures. From her purse, she withdrew a small photo album. Inside were snapshots of a toddler Alex at 2, at 3, smiling from a high chair, playing in a sandbox, asleep in a crib. You can have these, she said, pushing the album toward him. They're rightfully yours. Alex stared at the images, physical evidence of the childhood he couldn't remember. The brief period when he'd had a home, a family, stability. Memories preserved by a woman who had ultimately chosen to discard him. Thank you, he said finally, taking the album, for these at least. Outside, Ellie waited anxiously, rising when Alex emerged looking drained but composed. Okay, she asked simply. Yeah, he showed her the photo album. She gave me these. Pictures from when I was little. Together, they looked through the snapshots, Ellie seeing for the first time the toddler her baby had become during their years of separation. You loved applesauce, she noted, pointing to a photo of him covered in the stuff. And trucks, apparently. I still do, Alex admitted. Like applesauce, I mean. It was a small thing, this shared discovery of a preference that had survived from toddlerhood to adolescence. But it felt significant, a thread of continuity in a life defined by disruption. Later that evening, as they sat in the living room, together, Alex sorting through the photos while Ellie worked on her laptop, he asked, what will happen to the other kids? The ones who were stolen like me? It depends, Ellie said, setting aside her work. The younger ones will have transition, planned, supervised visits, gradual integration of their birth families into their lives. The adults will decide for themselves whether they want contact. Do you think they will want contact? The question carried obvious personal weight. Alex was asking, indirectly, about his own choice to stay with Ellie, to begin building a relationship, despite the years and trauma between them. I hope so, she said carefully, but everyone's situation is different. Their adoptive families might have been loving, stable. They might not feel the same gap that we've both lived with. Alex nodded, considering this. I think about Lily and Zach sometimes. How it would have been if they'd been adopted as babies, given to families who wanted them. Whether that would have been better than what they actually got. There are no simple answers, Ellie said. The system fails too many children. But what matters now is moving forward, making sure you all have better options ahead than behind. Yeah, Alex gathered the photos, placing them carefully back in the album. One day at a time, right? It was a phrase Karen used often during their sessions, a reminder that healing happened gradually, that looking too far ahead could be overwhelming when the present itself required so much energy to navigate. One day at a time, Ellie agreed, watching as her son, for she could think of him that way now, without qualification or doubt, found a place for the album on the bookshelf. A visible integration of his fragmented past into their shared present, a beginning, not an ending. A step toward healing, not complete resolution, but movement in the right direction toward justice, toward understanding, toward whatever future. They would build from the broken pieces of their separate pasts. The legal paperwork for Alex's name change lay on the kitchen table, the blank line for his signature a silent question mark. At 17 and a half, he needed Ellie's consent as his legal guardian, but the choice remained entirely his. You don't have to decide today, Ellie reminded him, placing a mug of coffee beside the documents, or at all, for that matter. Alex stared at the papers. Alexander Matthews. A new identity built on an old connection, a reclaiming of what had been stolen. Or Alexander Foster Matthews, hyphenating to acknowledge both his past and his future. The options swam before him. What happens to Alex Foster if I do this? He asked quietly. Does he just disappear? Ellie sat across from him. No, he becomes part of Alexander Matthews. Everything you've experienced, everything you've overcome, that doesn't vanish because of a name change. Alex nodded, then picked up the pen. Without further hesitation, he signed the line, choosing Alexander Matthews with a decisive flourish. You're sure? Ellie asked, surprised by the suddenness of his decision. Foster was never really mine, he replied. It was assigned by the system. This, he tapped the signature, this is choosing my own identity. The name change became official 3 weeks later, just as Alex, now legally Alexander Matthews, passed. His GED with scores high enough to qualify for college admission. These twin milestones marked the beginning of a new phase. No longer strangers navigating a tenuous connection, but family building a shared life. Practical considerations arose. The apartment, comfortable for one person and workable for a temporary arrangement, felt increasingly cramped for two adults establishing permanent roots. We could look for something bigger, Ellie suggested one evening as they negotiated kitchen space, bumping elbows while preparing dinner. A house, maybe, with your college fund secure. I could use my savings for a down payment. Alex paused in chopping vegetables. You want to move? I thought you liked this place. I do, but it's always been just me. Just me and memories. She gestured toward what had once been the shrine-like nursery, now Alex's bedroom. Maybe it's time for a fresh start. Somewhere that's ours from the beginning, not mine that you moved into. The idea took root. They spent weekends visiting open houses, debating neighborhoods, discussing proximity to community colleges where Alex planned to start classes in the fall. Surprisingly, he took the lead in many of these discussions, revealing an unexpected interest in home design and practical considerations like south-facing windows and efficient heating systems. I used to imagine this, he admitted during one house tour when Ellie commented on his attention to detail. In foster homes, group placements, I'd redesign the spaces in my head. What I'd change if I could? What would make them feel more like ... home, Ellie finished when he trailed off. Yeah, he ran his hand along a wooden banister, testing its solidity. Never thought I'd actually get to choose. They found the right place in early summer, a modest 3-bedroom craftsman. with a small yard and a front porch perfect for morning coffee. The previous owners had maintained it well, though the decor needed updating. The real estate agent pointed out newer houses with modern amenities, but Alex and Ellie both felt drawn to the older home's character and solidity. Moving day brought unexpected emotions. As Alex packed his few possessions from the apartment bedroom, Ellie found herself lingering in the space, remembering what it had been before the crib never assembled, the mobile of stars and planets, the shrine to a lost child who had miraculously found his way back to her. "You okay?" Alex asked, finding her standing in the empty room. "Just thinking about what this place represented. For so many years, it was all I had of you." He nodded, understanding more than she expected. "And now you have the real thing. Messy teenager and all." The joke for it was a joke. His first real attempt at lightening an emotional moment with her broke the melancholy. Ellie laughed, feeling the weight of the past lifting as they closed the door on the apartment for the final time. The new house quickly became home in ways the apartment never could have. They painted rooms together, chose furniture, established routines that accommodated both their needs. Alex claimed the bedroom with the best natural light for studying. Ellie set up a home office in the smallest bedroom. The third room they designated as a guest room, though both understood it was reserved primarily for the future visits of two specific guests. "I talked to Curran today," Alex said one evening as they assembled a bookshelf for the living room, "about Lily and Zach visiting for a weekend. Their foster parents are open to it if you are." "Of course," Ellie replied immediately. "We can get the guest room ready, maybe set up an air mattress too. You don't mind having two more kids around? They're important to you. That makes them important to me." Alex nodded, focusing intently on aligning the shelf brackets. "I was thinking maybe we could take them to that amusement park outside of town. Zach's never been on a roller coaster." "Sounds perfect." The visit happened in July, a weekend of laughter, sugar-fueled energy, and moments of surprising tenderness. Lily, initially reserved and watchful around Ellie, gradually relaxed as she observed the genuine relationship developing between Alex and his biological mother. Zach, less burdened by past experiences, embraced the adventure wholeheartedly, declaring the guest room way better than foster care and the amusement park the best day ever. On the final evening, as the four of them made homemade pizzas in the kitchen, Alex caught Ellie's eye across the counter. In his expression, she read everything he couldn't yet say aloud: gratitude, belonging, and the quiet amazement of having found, against all odds, a place that felt like home. Later, after Lily and Zach had gone to bed, Alex joined Ellie on the front porch. They sat in companionable silence, watching fireflies illuminate the summer darkness. "Thank you," he said finally, "for this weekend, for everything. They're wonderful kids," Ellie replied. "I see why you care about them so much. They needed someone like I did." He hesitated, then added softly, "Like you did too, I guess." The observation, this recognition that their wounds had mirrored each other, that both had suffered the absence of the other, demonstrated a perspective Ellie hadn't expected from him. An empathy that saw beyond his own pain to recognize hers. "As well, we found each other," she said simply. "That's what matters now." The first time Alex called her mom happened 2 weeks later. It was accidental, a slip during a mundane conversation about dinner plans. The word hung between them, Alex's eyes widening with a mixture of shock and vulnerability, Ellie's breath catching in her throat. "Sorry," he muttered, turning away. "Don't be," she said quickly. It's okay. If that's what feels right to you." He nodded, not meeting her eyes, but the tension in his shoulders eased slightly. They didn't discuss it further, both understanding that some transitions couldn't be forced or analyzed. They simply happened when the heart was ready. As summer faded into fall and Alex began college classes, their lives settled into rhythms that felt both ordinary and miraculous. Breakfast conversations about assignments and work schedules, evening meals where they shared the day's challenges and triumphs, weekend projects around the house, the gradual accumulation of shared references, inside jokes, traditions being born. Family, Ellie realized, watching Alex study at the kitchen table one evening. Not the family they would have been without the intervention of Dr. Wells and 17 years of separation. Something different, harder won, more consciously chosen, shaped by their individual journeys and mutual loss, but family nonetheless. Building itself day by day, one small moment at a time, 1 year after the DNA test confirmed what their hearts already knew. Alex stood behind the customer service desk at Save Mart, his employee badge reading A. Matthews in bold letters. The part-time position had been Maria's suggestion, a way to earn spending money while attending college classes, and perhaps more importantly, a way to reclaim the space where their story had begun. Got another application for the food pantry? He told Ellie, who was finishing her shift at the adjacent register. After 17 years on night shift, she'd finally transitioned to days, her seniority earning her the coveted community outreach coordinator position. Great, she replied, taking the form. That makes 15 families this month. The food pantry had been their joint project, an initiative to collect the store's near expiration items and distribute them to homeless teens and struggling families instead of discarding them. What had started as a small operation run from the back of the store had grown into a community-wide program, with local restaurants and other grocers contributing. Corinne called, Alex said as they walked to the parking lot after their shifts. She's bringing Lily and Zach by tomorrow. Lily got accepted to that technical program she applied for. That's fantastic. We should celebrate. Maybe dinner at that Italian place they like? Alex nodded, sliding into the passenger seat of Ellie's car. His driving lessons were progressing, but city traffic still made him nervous. She also mentioned that the foster care reform bill passed the state legislature, the one with the Wells Amendment. The Wells Amendment, named after the doctor whose crimes had exposed systematic failures in both medical oversight and child protective services, required hospitals to implement strict protocols for infant tracking and mandated regular audits of adoption agencies. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it represented concrete change sparked by their case. Your testimony made a difference, Ellie said as she navigated toward home. All those hours with the legislative committee weren't wasted, Alex shrugged, uncomfortable with praise. It was the right thing to do. At 18, he carried himself with a quiet confidence that still surprised Ellie sometimes. This young man who had emerged from the angry, defensive teenager she'd first encountered in the rain. His first year of college had revealed an aptitude for computer science, particularly programming related to database security. Making sure records can't be falsified or manipulated, he had explained when choosing his major. Home was lively that evening, with Maria joining them for dinner to celebrate her promotion to store manager. The three of them had become a family unit of sorts, Ellie and Alex at the center, with Maria as the beloved aunt who appeared bearing gifts and stories that made Alex laugh despite himself. Remember when you first started searching hospital records? Maria asked Ellie over dessert. The administrators thought you were certifiable. They weren't entirely wrong, Ellie admitted. I was operating on instinct more than evidence for years. Mother's intuition, Maria said, winking at Alex. Turns out it's a real thing. Speaking of mothers, Alex said, setting down his fork, I've been thinking about your parents. My grandparents, I guess. Ellie's parents had been a complicated absence in their reconnection story. Living in Arizona since their retirement, They had initially responded to the news of Alex's discovery with disbelief, then cautious acceptance during video calls. They hadn't yet visited in person, citing health concerns and travel difficulties. "What about them?" Ellie asked carefully. "I think we should go see them, instead of waiting for them to come here." The suggestion caught Ellie off guard. "You want to go to Arizona?" "They're not getting any younger," Alex said pragmatically. "And it's been a year. Time to either build that relationship or stop pretending we're going to." His directness, a trait that had emerged as he grew more comfortable in his identity, reminded Ellie of her own father. The observation made her smile despite the seriousness of the topic. "You're right," she said. "I'll call them tomorrow." Later, after Maria had left and they were clearing dishes, Alex asked, "Do you think they'll like me?" The vulnerability in the question reminded Ellie that beneath his newfound confidence, the wounds of rejection still lurked. "They'll love you," she assured him. "How could they not?" The trip to Arizona happened during Alex's spring break. The meeting was awkward at first, her parents uncertain how to relate to this nearly adult grandson who had materialized from what they believed was grief-driven fantasy. But by the second day, as they watched Alex help her father with a woodworking project in the garage, the ice began to thaw. "He has my father's hands," Ellie's mother observed, watching from the kitchen window. "Your grandfather's. The same way of holding tools." Small connections formed, Alex's interest in astronomy mirroring her father's lifelong hobby, his analytical approach to problems resembling her mother's methodical nature. Genetic echoes that had survived 17 years of separation, binding him to a family tree he was only beginning to recognize. On their final evening in Arizona, Ellie's father pulled her aside while Alex and her mother prepared dinner. "I owe you an apology," he said, his voice gruff with emotion. "All those years, telling you to move on, to accept what the doctor said." "You were right, a parent knows." "You were trying to protect me," Ellie replied, squeezing his hand. "You couldn't have known." "Still, we should have believed you." He glanced toward the kitchen, where Alex was laughing at something her mother had said. "He's a fine young man. You've done well with him." "We've done well with each other," Ellie corrected gently. The milestone of reconnecting with her parents, of completing the circle of family, seemed to unlock something in Alex. Back home, he began asking more questions about his early history, about the pregnancy, about what Ellie had imagined for their life together before everything was derailed. One evening, he approached her with a proposal that left her speechless. "I want to visit the grave," he said. "The one where you thought I was buried." Ellie stared at him, uncertain she'd heard correctly. "Why?" "To see it for myself. To understand what you went through." He paused, then added, "And to remove it. Since it's empty anyway." The small headstone in Oakdale Cemetery had been a fixture in Ellie's grief for 17 years. "Baby boy Matthews," it read, with his birth and supposed death date. She had visited regularly at first, then sporadically. As doubt began to undermine her acceptance, then not at all once her suspicions hardened into certainty. "Are you sure?" she asked. "It's not exactly a pleasant outing, I'm sure." The cemetery was peaceful on the spring morning they visited, wildflowers dotting the carefully maintained grounds. Ellie led the way to the small marker located in a section dedicated to infant graves. Alex knelt beside the stone, tracing the letters with his finger. "This is weird," he admitted. "Seeing your own grave when you're very much alive." "I used to talk to you here," Ellie said, her voice soft with memory. "Tell you about my day. What you might have been doing if you'd lived. What did you imagine?" "For me, I mean, everything. Learning to walk, starting school, making friends. Ordinary things that seemed miraculous because they were denied to us." She knelt beside him. "I imagined you happy, and now I don't have to imagine." They had arranged with the cemetery administration to have the marker removed. A groundskeeper arrived with the necessary tools, efficiently extracting the small stone and loading it onto his cart. "What happens to it?" Alex asked. "They'll dispose of it, or you can take it if you prefer," the man replied. Alex shook his head. "No, it was never really mine anyway." As they walked back to the car, Ellie felt a weight lifting, the final remnant of the lie that had shaped 17 years of their separate lives now removed. The empty grave, no longer a symbol of what she lost, but what she'd found. "What now?" Alex asked as they drove away. "Home," Ellie replied simply. The word contained multitudes, the house they shared, the family they were building, the future they were reclaiming one day at a time. Home, not a place of loss and remembrance, but of presence and possibility. That evening, they hosted a small gathering: Maria, Karen, Lily, and Zach, Patricia Clark, and Detective Ramirez, to celebrate both the removal of the grave marker and the 1-year anniversary of the DNA confirmation. It wasn't a traditional milestone, but nothing about their journey had followed conventional paths. To truth, Karen proposed as they raised glasses around the dinner table. "And to found family." "And to grocery store sandwiches," Alex added with a small smile. "Sometimes the smallest kindnesses change everything." Ellie caught his eye across the table, remembering that rainy night when she'd first approached a hungry teenager huddled under the store awning. How close they had come to missing each other entirely. How many coincidences and choices had aligned to bring them to this moment? Full circle, she thought. Not back where they started. They could never return to what might have been, but to a new beginning, built on the foundation of what they had endured and overcome together. 2 years after their first meeting in the rain, Ellie adjusted the cap on Alex's head, smoothing an invisible wrinkle from his graduation gown. The community college auditorium buzzed with excited families, but Ellie stood still, absorbing the moment she'd never dared imagine possible. "It's crooked," Alex complained, reaching up to fix the cap himself. At 19, he had grown another inch, filled out through the shoulders, his face losing the last traces of adolescent hollowness. The sullen, distrustful boy from the Save Mart awning had transformed into a young man with clear eyes and quiet confidence. "Sorry," Ellie said, stepping back. "Just nervous, I guess." "You're nervous?" "I'm the one who has to walk across the stage without tripping. You'll be fine. Just don't look down." His smile, still a treasure for its rarity and genuineness, eased the tension between them. Some moments still carried the weight of all they'd missed, all the milestones that should have been shared but weren't. Graduation was one of those bittersweet occasions that highlighted both their connection and the years of separation. "Maria's saving seats," Ellie said, checking her phone. "Your grandparents just arrived too." "And Lily and Zach, Karen's bringing them." "They wouldn't miss it." The community college's accelerated program had allowed Alex to complete his associate degree in computer science in just 2 years. His grades had earned him a transfer scholarship to the state university, where he'd continue toward a bachelor's degree in the fall. "I should join the other graduates," he said, glancing toward where students were lining up. "See you after?" "I'll be the one cheering embarrassingly loud," Ellie promised. She found her way to where Maria had staked out a row of seats. Her parents were already settled, her father's oxygen tank discreetly positioned beneath his chair. Their relationship with Alex had deepened since that first visit to Arizona, with regular video calls and another in-person visit during Christmas. "There's our graduate," Maria said as the procession of students entered the auditorium. "Front row, third from the left." Ellie spotted him immediately, standing taller than most of his classmates, his posture straight but not rigid. Pride welled in her chest, along with a familiar ache for the journey that had brought them here. The ceremony proceeded with the expected speeches about futures unfolding and potentials realized. When Alex's name was called, Alexander James Matthews, the small group in their row erupted in applause and cheers, joined by Karen, Lily, and Zach, who had slipped in just before the ceremony began. Later, at the house, they celebrated with a small gathering. Alex had insisted on nothing elaborate, just family and close friends, a homemade meal, and the chocolate cake that had become his favorite. The backyard was strung with lights, the early summer evening perfect for an outdoor celebration. Speech, Maria called as they finished dessert, raising her glass. From the graduate, Alex shook his head, embarrassed, but stood when the others joined the chorus of encouragement. He looked around the table at Ellie, her parents, Maria, Corinne, Lily, and Zach, and Patricia Clark, who had become a surrogate grandmother of sorts. "I'm not good at speeches," he began, "but I want to thank all of you. 2 years ago, I was homeless, sick, and pretty convinced my life would be short and meaningless. I didn't trust anyone, didn't believe in family, didn't see any kind of future for myself." He paused, his eyes finding Ellie's. Then someone offered me half a sandwich in the rain. Something that simple, and everything changed. He raised his glass to second chances, to found family, and to my mom, who never stopped believing I was out there somewhere. The word mom, still used sparingly, reserved for moments of significance, landed like a benediction. Ellie blinked back tears as they all raised their glasses, the simple toast encompassing a journey too profound for elaborate speeches. After the guests had gone and the cleanup was complete, Alex and Ellie sat on the porch swing in companionable silence. The evening air was sweet with honeysuckle, fireflies blinking in the darkening yard. "I got a call today," Alex said finally, "from the foundation." The foundation he referred to was an organization they'd established using a portion of the settlement. Funds from the civil suit against County General and Dr. Wells, dedicated to supporting youth aging out of foster care and reuniting families separated by medical fraud. It had started small but was gaining momentum and recognition. "Good news?" Ellie asked. "They want me to speak at the national conference about my experience, our experience." "That's wonderful. Will you do it?" He nodded. "I think so. If you'll come with me." "Of course." Alex stretched his legs, pushing the swing into a gentle rhythm. "I've been thinking about my career path after graduation next year, and I want to focus on database security for healthcare systems, creating protocols that prevent the kind of records manipulation Wells used." He glanced at her. "Maybe prevent other families from going through what we did?" Ellie nodded, unsurprised. From the beginning, Alex had approached his trauma not just as something to overcome, but as a catalyst for change, for himself and for systems that had failed him and others. "You know what today reminded me of?" she said after a moment. "What?" "Your first day of school. Not the actual one, the one I imagined. All those years when I thought you were gone. I used to picture it so clearly, buying supplies, taking photos, walking you to the classroom. And was today anything like you imagined?" "Better," she said. "Simply because it's real." The reality they had built together over 2 years wasn't perfect. Alex still had nightmares sometimes, still retreated into silence when emotions became overwhelming. Ellie still caught herself hovering too much, trying to compress 17 years of maternal protection into everyday interactions. They disagreed, misunderstood each other, needed space. But they were learning how to communicate, how to trust, how to be family in their own unique way. The following morning, Alex drove them to Save Mart for their Saturday shifts. His confidence behind the wheel had grown with practice, though he still preferred familiar routes. "Someone's waiting by the employee entrance," he noted as they pulled into the parking lot. A teenage girl huddled near the door, her thin frame and wary posture immediately recognizable to both of them. Not unlike Alex 2 years earlier, though. Younger 15 or 16, Ellie guessed. New in town, Alex said quietly. I've seen her checking the dumpsters the last few nights. They approached carefully, Ellie letting Alex take the lead. He had developed an instinct for these encounters, knowing when to push, when to back off, how to offer help without triggering the defensive reflexes of street survival. Store doesn't open for another hour, he said casually to the girl. But the cafe next door is open if you're hungry. The girl studied them suspiciously. I'm fine. Sure, Alex agreed easily. Bet their muffins are really good. My mom and I were going to grab coffee before our shift. You're welcome to join. The invitation gentle, no pressure, an easy escape route hung in the air between them. The girl glanced from Alex to Ellie, assessing, calculating risks, and benefits with the practiced efficiency of someone used to making survival decisions. Maybe just coffee, she conceded finally. As they walked toward the cafe, Ellie caught Alex's eye over the girl's head. The silent communication that passed between them contained volumes, recognition of where they'd started, awareness of how far they'd come, commitment to extending to others the same lifeline that had saved them, both. Inside, as Alex engaged the girl in careful conversation. Her name was Jade. She'd been in town about a week. She'd left an abusive home situation in the next county. Ellie observed the young man her son had become. Compassionate without being condescending. Honest about his own experiences without overwhelming a stranger with his story. Present in a way that created space for trust to form. I know someone who might be able to help, he told Jade as she finished her muffin. A social worker who actually listens. No pressure, but if you're interested. The scene echoed their own beginning as simple act of kindness, food shared with a hungry stranger, the first tentative thread of connection. But with a crucial difference. This time, they could offer not just temporary relief, but a pathway informed by their journey, their hard-won knowledge of systems both broken and healing. Later, after Corinne had been called and Jade had cautiously agreed to meet with her, Alex and Ellie began their shifts at SafeMart. The routine was familiar now, restocking shelves, assisting customers, managing the food pantry program they'd established. Ordinary work made extraordinary by the context of their shared story. Do you think she'd be okay? Ellie asked during their lunch break. Jade? I don't know, Alex admitted. But she has a better chance now than she did this morning. Sometimes that's all you can offer, a slightly better chance. The wisdom in his words, earned through experience, not borrowed from platitudes, struck Ellie anew. Her son had emerged from trauma, not bitter but determined, not hardened but purposefully gentle, carrying his past not as a burden, but as a tool for understanding and change. As they returned to work, Ellie paused at the store entrance, looking out at the spot where she'd first offered half a sandwich to a hungry teenager. In the rain. Such a small moment, such an ordinary gesture. Neither of them could have imagined then how that simple act of kindness would ripple outward, changing not just their lives, but potentially countless others through the foundation, through Alex's future work, through moments like this morning with Jade. New beginnings, she thought, watching Alex help an elderly customer reach an item on a high shelf. Not the beginning they should have had, that had been stolen irretrievably, but perhaps a better one than either could have created alone, forged in the crucible of separation and reunion, loss and recovery, grief and unexpected joy. A beginning, built on truth, on conscious choice, on the daily decision to move forward together despite the shadows of the past. A beginning that honored what had been lost while embracing what had been found. As if sensing her thoughts, Alex glanced up from across the store, offering a small smile of acknowledgement. Mother and son, separated by circumstance, reunited by chance, connected now by something deeper than biology, by the family they had chosen to build together. One day at a time, outside, rain began to fall gently against the windows, not the desperate downpour of their first meeting, but a soft spring shower that nourished rather than threatened. A reminder that sometimes, even in the midst of storm, something beautiful and unexpected could take root, grow, and ultimately, against all odds, flourish.